June 12, 2017, what's this thing called? City Council Budget Work Session. And we will start with our supervisor.
Great. Well, thanks, council and members of the community and staff for being here. This is our annual budget work session, and delighted to present the budget to you. What we've got in front, before we kind of go through some of the details, I really want to tell council this is a team effort. Each of the management team sitting kind of behind me has been helped put together their own pieces, their goals, their accomplishments. We've had lots of conversations about what they would like to do for the next year, reviewed revenues, expenditures. I also really want to introduce Sue Casey, our interim finance director. As council knows, Deanna Hilberts, who was our finance director, left the week before I started in January. We had a half-time retiree who was helping kind of keep everything moving along and starting some things, but then Sue came a month ago and we really have worked together to bring you the budget that you have before you. So I can't give Sue enough appreciation for all of her dedication and expertise. And also, there's been a lot of work, last minute work, just kind of putting all together, and I want to thank Kat and Rebecca and Kathy who really pitched in and helped on quite a few things. So what we're going to do today is really, this is the agenda in front of you. We're going to walk through, Sue and I will give you an executive summary and a financial overview, and then we're going to walk through the expenditure budgets, and you'll see that you have in front of you as well. The way I'd recommend we do this is within the budget document, they are organized by sections. So like central administration is 3 or 4 or 5 different program budgets. Public safety is fire and police. So what I'd like to do is have us take a section at a time. Each person who owns that budget will come up, present, and then we'll do questions from council at the end of that section. My concern is if we do questions after each individual program budget, we will start to run out of time. And I think it will work by section, because there are some themes when we're talking about community development or public works. And then we will have questions as we finish each section, and then we'll have around time for council to have general comments and questions also. Then we'll go out to public comment, and then we'll have discussion, any direction by council, and then again, we're coming back next Monday to have this on your formal agenda for a budget hearing and adoption. And we can be fluid as we go through and see how this works. As is typical with the public agency budget, we are preparing for 17-18, and we are focused. We will show you all the funds, but we are focused on the general fund. And one thing I just want to say at the very beginning is you look at the budget. Sometimes it's confusing because you'll see a budget salary, for example, in city manager's office. And that salary is just the personnel allocations that are charged to that program budget. So for example, a piece of my time as a manager is charged to the city manager's office. It's also charged to water. It's also charged to the successor agency. So in the budget, in the final budget we'll have for you, it may not be Monday, but we will have a kind of a personnel allocation so you can see where individual people, what the percent of their time is charged. And that's the standard piece we typically have in the budget. So, that sometimes is confusing because some of these are people like city manager or city clerk. They really are programs. It's not just a person, if that makes sense. Let's see. So just one other logistic item I do want to mention, the chief is actually presenting at, as part of this number speaker series at like 6 o'clock, so he will need to leave at 5. We do have representatives from the sheriff's office, and so we will take any questions on the police budget when Brett presents, so that we can have the expertise in the room if the council has questions on that. Any comments about process? Okay, so let's dive in. So some of you, the first thing I'm going to do is just very briefly, part of what, as I put this budget together with the team, was really thinking about where we are organizationally. Council, you have heard part of this in the retreat. I'm not going to belabor this, but as council knows, we contract out police and fire. So the overall staffing is lean. We have 35 employees, and there's basically 11 professional and management staff. So when we're talking about new initiatives or projects, there's a core group of folks that really have the capability and background to take that on. Because the basic operations and regular business take the majority of staff time and capacity. There are some places where we have some kind of service level holes and limited capacity. Accounting is one, and I've got recommendations for you there. Also, we need some additional work on project management, public information, in the world of public safety. Some things we couldn't address this year, but I want us to be focused on moving forward is some additional resources for fire training. We need to be doing some additional work on emergency services. And I also think the police department would be really well served by a full-time receptionist. Those additions are not in this year's budget, but some things I want you to understand as we look forward. Maintenance, planning, and building are stretched. They're making do and continuing to get the work done, but as the economy's hot, those folks are stressed. I mean, stretched, maybe a little stressed too. I really want to thank the community for passing Measure U, the 5-year half-cent sales tax, and council's leadership on that. I think that is a very important thing to provide us with stability. And one thing we'll work on this next year is a 5-year financial forecast. We talked overall during the retreat also about infrastructure. Overall, the city has been very proactive about putting money into infrastructure, from streets and our water infrastructure. But there's other areas of whether you call it infrastructure or you call it community amenities that are a bit tired and aged. And that's really some of our parks, the plaza. You see some beginning money in here, but I think as we put together a 5-year forecast and look at a 5-year capital plan this next year, we'll really want to look at starting to program and being more strategic about that. These are just some slides that we talked about with council, and we really are looking at some strategic planning around our general plan, around financial sustainability when the 5-year sales tax ends, and really infrastructure quality of life. Caltrans will be paving all of Highway 12 through town, not just Broadway. So if there's things we want to do related to that, or other things around amenities, we need to be being strategic and looking forward. So at our retreat about 2 weeks ago, maybe 3 weeks ago, I'm trying to remember timing, council set these goals, and we're going to be coming back and putting some meat on these goals with specific strategic initiatives under them. But the goals that council wanted to focus on for the next 3 years were community character, financial sustainability, launching and preparing and implementing our general plan process, and housing opportunities and strategies. So you'll see there are some beginning placeholder dollars and ideas in here to respond to that direction from council. So now to launch into kind of the budget. As we talk about the budget, I think it's really important, like, what is a budget? And remember, what is the purpose? So the purpose of the budget really, first and foremost, to capture council's goals and figure out what are the resources needed to implement those goals. It's also to forecast revenues and expenditures. And I really see the budget as an opportunity to educate not only the council, but the community about the city's program, its finances, its needs, what we're trying to do for the community. And it also represents what we know right now. So 2 months from now, it will not be, we'll know more. And so things may shift. We do the budget, and then we do a mid-year. So it really is kind of a point in time of what we know, and it's a plan. Doesn't have to be perfect, it's a plan. So some overall key messages in terms of the budget. We're lucky still to be sitting in a positive economy. It looks like it's going to stay that way for 1 more year. At some point that bubble will burst, but I don't think we're there yet. And from reading we've done of different economists. But that definitely is driving increased workload and activity. Our revenues are stable with kind of flattening increases in some areas. So the budget is balanced. There is no general fund reserve backfilling other than to carry over some projects that weren't completed this year. One thing you'll see within the budget is I am recommending that we move forward with an increase in TOT from 12% to 14%. If you recall, the hoteliers came forward with that recommendation a couple of months ago. And from the research, it looks like in Sonoma and Napa, all other communities are at a 14% transient occupancy tax. That tax obviously impacts our tourists, but at this point, the TOT for Sonoma is less than everyone else in the region. And so my recommendation is we take that up, and that would probably bring over 700,000, maybe closer to about 780,000. And that would be funding that then council could look at and program in the following year. Our expenses are increasing modestly. We do have some contracts, and overall, I think we are in much better shape than a lot of public agencies. And I think this community has had kind of a long-term practice of fiscal prudence that really shows. So I'll show you another slide in a little bit showing how to do some of your council goals using some one-time use of general fund reserves and some community investments where one big change in the budget is we have realigned how we're doing street maintenance and the program budgets to provide some clarity. We're also recommending to invest in the plaza. I think the first piece of kind of a phase one is to redo the trash and recycling containers, figure out a way that those can be aesthetically nicer, and yet still really work for the operational needs of our staff. So with workers' comp injuries, bicycles, and some of the next phase of some of the restrooms. So Dan will talk more about that. And this budget also represents a continued investment that the council has made in a number of nonprofits and community investments. So that's the high level messages. The overall budget is $17.6 million general fund. It's about a $32 million overall city budget. And there is a carryover from reserves of $313,000 for projects that we didn't finish in this year that we are then carrying that money over to finish in this coming year. In terms of the economy and revenues, the Bay Area, Sonoma, the economy is still very strong. We are looking at property tax going to about a 3.5% increase. Sales tax, a little less than 1%. And TOT, right now it's budgeted for 0, but we've been looking at that over the past few days and really think that we should be looking at an increase there. So what we'll bring back to you in a week will be about a 1.8% increase. It'll be about another $130,000. And again, we just talked about the TOT, and I mentioned that. I have placed in this budget, if we go forward and council wants to increase the TOT, that requires going to the voters. The earliest I think to do that is the November 2017. I think it makes sense to do it in 2017 versus 2018. 2018 is going to be such a full agenda election. I think things can kind of get lost in there. And there's frankly no reason not to move forward sooner. If we do, we have to pay for part of the election costs. So based on an estimate from the county, we have put in this budget $33,000 for elections. And if council wants to do that, we would come back in July and August for you to take the legislative actions to create the ordinance and the resolution to consolidate the election with the county. So, and with that, that would increase those city revenues. So a few changes and talk about kind of personnel. We are currently in contract with our labor groups. We only have SEIU, we have one labor group, 35 employees. The rest of the folks are not represented. And when you're in labor negotiations, you don't budget any changes. So what is in budget is the same as last year for this coming year. We will finish negotiations, and then whatever direction we get from council, and when we bring the tentative agreements back for council approval, then we also bring a mid-year budget adjustment whenever that occurs. So there are no increases in here for salary other than your typical 5% merit increases, and we'll adjust later. We have modified some of the personnel allocations. This is, again, as I mentioned earlier, where people are individually charged to different program budgets. So within general fund budgets, water, and successor agency. We've also done some modest increases in professional development and training. As we looked at budgets, there were some places through the recession that had gotten quite thin, and I think this is an important part to make sure that our staff has, kind of the professional development and is keeping up with things with their colleagues. The public employees retirement system is the city's retirement system that we belong to. There is an unfunded liability. There's a normal cost, which is the cost for this current year. Those are in budget. There's also an unfunded liability, and the unfunded liability of those it's an increase of about $130,000, and that's in the budget as well. The one thing that will look weird to you if you look at and try to compare last year to this year, historically those costs have just been paid for as a transfer. They weren't put in specific, at least this last year, were not put in specific department budgets. I think it's better practice to really, you've got your health care and your life insurance, and you've got what the current cost of your PERS or your retirement system. It also makes sense to have the unfunded liability as a component of those benefits so that those are within the department budgets at this point. So things look a little different when you compare. And then the only kind of organizational change that I'm recommending this year is to reorganize the finance department and to add an accounting manager position. and to upgrade the finance director position to an assistant city manager over administrative services. This is a model that I've seen in other places. I've worked with this model, and so the administrative services assistant city manager would oversee personnel, HR, risk management, insurance, and finance. But we really, and you'll see once we go through and you can look at the org charts, what the actual staffing is. We can talk more about that in that department. Some other key expenditures in terms of contracts. Our legal costs are increasing. There's an estimated increase of about $60,000 here. Part of this reflects what actual spending has been in the past few years, where it didn't look like things really had been adjusted, but also just that as we have some really key development projects going through our town, any lawsuits, et cetera, I think this is a better reflection of what actually will be spent. The police contract is about a $330,000 increase based on labor agreement, workers' comp, and let the chief talk through that. And fires increased also about $160,000 based on updates to the labor agreements. I've also put placeholder funding in for the state lease for the Casa Grande parking lot, is also a contract that's been added. There were a few minor increases for technology. Council saw the new Civic web portal that we're going to be enrolling here next Monday, or this week. And in addition, we've put some funding in to update our website. And when we do these kind of things, it's important that we do two things, not only just update the technology, but sometimes you have to pay someone to redo content, or you need some additional staff assistance when you're putting in new technology. So the website also includes someone to help do some of that content. And the same thing in the financial software implementation, as we've, for the past few months, looked at our Springbrook, our financial system. This is a system that needs some additional implementation investment. The city started it about maybe 4.5 years ago, bought the new system, and then had about a 9-month or 12-month lag where we lost our finance manager, and then a new person came in and picked it up when we were mid-implementation. And so there are some pieces that are not fully implemented with that. So Sue has already reached out to the vendor, and we will need to do some one-time money to kind of, not necessarily from the vendor, but potentially paying someone to help organize and work through some of the accounting information to make sure that we are fully aligned with the new software. And then desktops and laptops coming. As I mentioned, community sponsorship, this really is about some of the nonprofits and the places where the city underwrites facility leases, your community grant program. The council set a policy that the community fund grant program basically is 1.5% of your ongoing general fund revenues, and that's about a $10,000 increase this next year. So we'll come back in July and August with a continuation of council's direction of the hybrid and what to do there. And if you remember, those were kind of doing some contracts for those core services with folks that are doing recreation and environmental, and then heritage events and the discretionary. So we'll come back and have where the money is here. Street funding, I'm not going to go through this too much other than say the city has really invested heavily in streets through the years, much more frankly than a lot of communities I've seen using general fund to basically invest in streets. We're lucky we have the new Senate Bill 1 provides some new one-time funding. So the chart at the bottom really shows, like in 16-17, this was the funding from both gas tax and Measure M, about $300,000 that we had in funding. This year, with 50% of SB1, we're about $500,000, and next year it'll be about $680,000. So that's really nice because that will really help reduce some of the general fund investment that we've been doing in the streets. This chart gets a little detailed, and I don't think you, as council, you necessarily need to know all these machinations, but if anyone wants to go to this level, what we basically have done is there used to be 4 accounts in street infrastructure, and we have now gone and created, we have 4, but they're different. So what we've done basically is gas tax used to have all our people and our maintenance dollars. And the best practice to have gas tax just be a capital project and then transferring out a gas tax special revenue into another fund, into a capital fund. And so we've created a new street maintenance fund, which is just funded by general fund. That's where the people and the maintenance dollars are. And we have a new capital projects fund where you can look and see all the capital projects. What this basically does is tee us up to move to a 5-year capital plan, which is something we need to do over the next year. It gets to be in arcane accounting, so we'll go through that in a minute. The water fund, as we've been looking at the water fund, our community has basically conserved 26% since 2013 in water, which is fabulous. But that means that our revenues are not coming in as the 2014 water rate had structured. So this just shows kind of what revenue we thought was going to come in based on the water fund, what the revenue budget has been in actual. And you can see the last 2 years, it looks like we are starting to have to eat into fund balance to manage the operations of the water fund. So we definitely want to be looking at our water fund. In addition, there's been some changes in law since we did our water study in 2014. And so we are recommending a new water rate study within the budget that will allow us to look at all those items in addition to doing a cost allocation plan. So the funding for a new water rate study is within the budget. We also recommended that we discontinue two of the transfers, a transfer for franchise fees and in lieu property tax. These are transfers that went from the water fund to the general fund. And we need to do this water rate study, really analyze again what some of those costs are. And then we can look to see if we need to, what we need to do to go back. So at this point, what we're doing is we will not have those two transfers from the water fund into the general fund for 17-18. And then I'm recommending, or what the budget shows you is to take 3 years and sequester those funds within the general fund reserve. And then we'll do the water rate study. We'll see what the actual true-up dollars are. It may be that while the categories as they're named may not be right, but maybe the actual dollars of what the general fund is supporting the water rate, the water fund, may be right. So we'll do a true-up at the end once we actually know. But meanwhile, we'll sequester those funds and wait and see. So there will be this will take a 6 to 9 month process. They'll be very transparent with the public as we move forward with that water rate study. Dan will talk about some of the water investments, and this is just a summary chart to make it easy to see when he talks. I talked a little bit about the capital improvement budget. We don't have a kind of a capital improvement, we have a 5-year capital improvement budget, but what we don't do is we don't encumber the funds. So every year we have to re-budget projects versus taking those projects, putting in an encumbered CIP, that money stays there, and then as you do the projects, you can add to those. So if you want to budget, you've got a $500,000 project, you budget $100,000 here, and then another 100, another 100, and then you've got your money to do it, and then you do it. It's a way, think of it as kind of a reserving account and building for big projects. So we have reorganized some of the funds so we can get ready to really implement the capital improvement budget. I won't go through this detail either. This is just a way, I think, also and one-stop for the council community to see what are some of the community investments that are in different types of budgets across. What are some of the facility investments and the street maintenance, and the individual management teams will go through these in more detail. Since council set these 4 goals of community character, financial sustainability, the general plan, and housing opportunities, there are some things that I think council will want to do in the next 3 years. So what we've done is basically taken and out of general fund reserves, I'm recommending the council that we put $50,000 aside for community character. We put $75,000 aside for financial sustainability. There's some financial assessment work to do, completing our software and a PERS actuarial study. And then overall, at this point, reserving about $100,000, but actually programming about $75,000 for 17-18. The general plan, as council, as we talked about in the retreat, and council wanted to move forward with that. I'm actually recommending that we look at starting that with doing some community visioning, a community survey, updating the economic development strategic plan. Those roughly could be about $155,000 for 17-18. But we reserve, in general fund reserve, we set aside about $500,000 to start for the general plan. And then the housing opportunities and strategies, also a placeholder of about $50,000 there with the overall to be determined. So we'll talk to you, Sue will give you a little more detail of the reserve balance, and you'll see it in a different way in just a few minutes. So with that, I'll turn it to Sue to go through the financial.
Okay, first off, I wanted to thank Kathy Capriola for allowing me the opportunity to help prepare the 17-18 budget. It's been an amazing and exhilarating experience. I've never prepared a budget in 4 weeks, so this is a record. But I feel like I've learned more about the city of Sonoma in 4 weeks than I've known probably in other cities in 2 years. So it's been a great experience. Extremely proud of the document. It's not an award-winning budget, but it certainly tells a story and it gives a really good message about the financials of the city of Sonoma. So with that, I'm just going to jump right into revenues for...
And just one thing, for members of the public, there are some handouts of the slides if folks want to see, so just want to make sure folks not there for some reason.
Okay, so I'm just going to kind of quickly go through the revenues for the city, and first we're going to start with the pie chart that shows general fund revenue for the city by category. And as with many cities, the biggest revenue source is taxes, and that's made up of your property taxes, sales tax, some other various transient occupancy tax, that's a big one for the city as well, and franchise tax, those kinds of things. Second largest is charges for services, and that's kind of a large category, but it includes all your fees, the EMS fees that they charge for ambulance service. That's one of your largest sources for charges for services. Various other ones, animal services, those kinds of things, and then various other smaller categories of revenues. Then, if you go to the next slide, it's it just kind of tells the story about 16-17, what was budgeted and what is budgeted for 17-18, and for taxes there is a dollar change of $556,000, and that is actually the RTTPF, or the redevelopment taxes, were actually only budgeted for $100,000 last year, and we actually received about $400,000, so we're budgeting that this year. So that's part of the larger increase. And then of course we did a 3.5% increase on property taxes.
So just so council's clear, these are with the elimination of redevelopment, then that property tax that is not already committed to recognized obligation payment schedules that the Department of Finance reviews every year and that you have reviewed. Once those commitments are made and paid, then the rest of the RDA money goes back to the county, and then the county basically distributes it out to the taxing agencies. So this is what, over time, we knew would occur, is that residual of that redevelopment property tax is coming back to cities now. So, and that number, we weren't quite sure what it was going to be, but it's starting to be more significant going forward. So it's about $450,000 this coming year.
So some of the more significant changes in charges for services, there's about a $300,000 increase from last year to this year. And that really has to do with EMS, the ambulance service revenue. And that's not always a guarantee, but it's kind of a trend of where we've been going with that. And then the other would be, let's see, intergovernmental revenue, that's grants, and we didn't have as many grants this year, so there's a decrease in that one. And also in miscellaneous revenue, we're getting a PG&E energy rebate, and that actually ended last year, so that's why the decrease in that. Operating transfers, less rollover of projects because some of the projects were completed, and then we're not using any fund balance this year, general fund balance. So your major revenue sources, your highest revenue source is TOT tax. And again, we had forecast that originally at 3.7, but we think it should be closer to 3.9 for next year, which is about a 1.8% increase. Property taxes are 20% of your budget, and that, again, is about a 3.5% increase over last year. Sales tax is flat. And Measure U is flat. It kind of follows the regular sales tax. Charges for services, again, some increase because of the EMS revenues. So on to expenditures. You can see the next slide shows expenditures by function, and that's really by department. So public safety is the biggest expense for the city, and that's normal for many cities, that it really is the biggest expense. Very important. The next biggest expense is your public works and street maintenance. And that's because you've spent a lot on street maintenance, but you also, it's a very expensive part of the budget, so that's why that one is next. And then the rest are, about the same. And the next slide is just your general fund expenditures by category. So again, police and fire service contracts are the largest, and salary and benefits are the next. Salary and benefits here are quite small. You run very lean, and you do a lot with very few people.
Are folks clear about the differences between those two slides? So this one, general fund expenditures by function, and then we have general fund expenditures by category. So we could have just done contract services on this and just had police all lumped in there, but we kind of felt like police and fire being so different, we kind of pulled them out. So they really are, they could have been in the services and supplies category.
I'm glad you emphasized that, because, one of the issues for public safety is the numbers always bulk together, and you don't look at equipment, all of those things that are necessary. So people think all the police and firefighters are making $300,000 a year, not considering the equipment, how expensive that is. So I think it's important to be able to separate that.
So you'll see some of that breakdown when we get to police and fire, and you'll see some of that breakdown.
I'll just ask, what are development services?
On which slide?
On the slide, general fund expenditures by function, 7% development services.
So development services is planning and building.
Oh,
All right, so then moving to, this is just a summary, we're gonna walk through these, but this shows you kind of the general fund.
Yeah, this shows by department and what the budget was for 16-17 and 17-18. And, some of the changes, a lot of the bigger changes have to do with the way we realigned public works. So it looks like things went up way, a lot, and went way down, but it's just because we realigned and put it in different funds. So pretty much everything else is standard. Fire and police, they did go up because of the contracts that they just settled. And of course, finance went up because there's one more position in there. I think those are the major changes in that slide. And then the next slide shows the other funds. And again, you'll see in public works gas tax. That's just because we took all the administration costs out of gas tax and put it back into the general fund. Prior, the general fund was just funding that was putting money into gas tax, and so we just realigned that and just put it back into the general fund. And only in gas tax right now, for next year, they'll just be the cost of of maintenance, of really street maintenance. And reserves. We'll be bringing to council an updated kind of fund balance policy. That'll be on the, are we taking it on the 19th or?
We'll see, we'll probably bring it in July and bring it back to you this is a required under GASB to have a clear, but this is kind of give you a preview of kind of what it looks like.
So what it does is it just tells you the different categories of your fund balance. And so as of 15-16, the estimated total general fund reserve is 7.7 million. And then you can go through the categories here. Non-spendable would mean that it cannot legally be spent, or it can't it can't be converted to cash. Then you have your restricted, and this would be things that are imposed by law or by loan restrictions, and we don't have either of those categories. We don't have any funds in either of those categories. Then you have your committed, and those are council formally imposed restrictions. So the two restrictions you have right now in your reserve policies, you have an emergency reserve, which is 17% of your general fund revenues, and that's to be used in the event of a local disaster or a catastrophic event. And then you have an operating reserve of 1.5. It's for kind of catastrophic events too, but maybe more economic events that you might need to use those funds. And then we have assigned, and those are funds that are reserved by council direction or the city manager for designated purposes. And right now, we've set aside these based on what we've put in the budget. There's the water transfer set aside for the possibly future true-up. It's for the
Yeah, this is what I was talking about earlier. This is for the water transfers that we're not doing this next year and looking back 3 years just to sequester that, and then we'll do a true up of that. Again, these were funds that came from the water fund to the general fund, and we will hold those and wait and see.
Hold those in the reserve. And then we're anticipating we're gonna do the general plan, and the total amount of that will probably be 500,000. For 17-18, we'll put 155 in there. And then we have the financial sustainability reserve and we're just setting aside 100,000 for that. And that would be for the software upgrades, those kinds of things. Then the other two are the housing opportunities and strategies reserve, and we're gonna put 50,000 aside, and then community character reserve at 50,000.
So just on the assigned pieces, as we think through and we bring the full plan, you look at your council goals and you actually approve your council goals. If we want to then adjust or do something with reserves, we can do this. But at least this creates some kind of a placeholder. I think it's also important to understand that, like on the housing opportunities piece, we don't, as a city, we're working on updating the housing impact study, but otherwise we don't have any funds set aside for housing. With the loss of redevelopment, we used to have 20% of redevelopment went to housing. We no longer have that kind of funding source for housing, and the council chose not to be the housing successor agency, and the council in 2012 transferred the assets and transferred that program to Sonoma County. So the county really is in the housing business as the successor agency of Sonoma, and we are not. Doesn't mean that we can't be looking at housing and the council can't understand what we have there. But for cities across California, the funding for housing really shifted dramatically with the loss of redevelopment. So this is really some placeholder dollars and we can have further conversation.
And then, so our unassigned,
So in
yes,
July, you said you're gonna bring the reserve issue back to us, is that what you're doing? Because the committed here for the emergency reserve, it's 17%, but I think the council is the one that decides that, right?
Correct.
So it could be 15, it could be 20, so I just wanted people to know that, it's not solid.
The council did pass a resolution, I think, in
2010, was it 10?
I think it was further back, but I could pull it and look, but there was a resolution councils passed where your reserve policy currently is 17% and 1.5 million. So when we bring back the reserve fund balance piece, if we can also look, and if council wants to do any adjustment, and looking at that policy, we can do that at that time as well.
It's just an opportunity to look back at why it was decided to do that, and so maybe that same criteria may not, be the same today, but I just wanted to ask that.
And the only other piece I just want to make on this is that I think as we look at what our one-time reserves are, we still do have a lawsuit with the state of California and that is still in process. Hope that will be resolved in the next 6-9 months, but that also could have an impact, so that's sitting out there. And I think as we look at reserves, I guess I would just caution the council to, while we do have some money that could be potentially reinvested in the community, and that would be great, I think we really want to have a plan and be thoughtful about how to do that, which is part of the reason of really having a 5-year forecast so you know what we're looking like as we move forward, and then also having a 5-year capital and really being able to plan strategically and be a little methodical about what we do. Okay.
I have a quick question.
Yeah.
On page 14, it says police contract increased by 336 and fire contract increased by 166. But on page 29, it shows fire being increased by 478 and police being increased by 505.
Right, so the contract is one piece of the entire program budget. So we also, as I mentioned, we took the unfunded PERS liability and we put those in the program budgets. So that is the difference. The actual contract, the city's contract with Valley of the Moon went up X amount, and our contract with the sheriffs went up the amount that's there. But we also took that unfunded liability, which the city had been paying, but we put it within those program budgets. So if you look at that overall chart, yeah, the overall budgets have gone up more, but that's
Yeah,
really
$1 million,
aligning,
yeah.
right, but that's really a realigning of what our current costs have been.
So the difference here, so for the fire contract, for example, only 166,000 is new dollars?
Correct.
Oh.
Meaning, yes, and then, but there are, we'll talk more about the unfunded liability a little bit, we'll go through.
Is it, that's not correct?
The contract, there is a piece of the dollars within the PERS unfunded liability that we put in the program budgets. A piece of that is the same as what it was last year. There also has been an increase in that unfunded liability that happens every year. But majority of the funds were being paid elsewhere in the city's budget, they just weren't visible.
Oh, okay, so then I won't ask a million questions about this, but do we have a document that shows us what are new dollars total?
By department or by,
Yeah, well, I just think like in here, trying to show what are the, increases and decreases, how will we know? Where is the document that has the actual increases and decreases?
well, we can look at increases and decreases by program budget. And I think as we go through the budget, that will get a little clearer. So let's go through the department budgets. If at the end of this, you still have questions, part of it, because the PERS actuarials were done via transfer, I'm not gonna go, it's really kind of apples and oranges to be able to give you a comparison. So part of it is not gonna be, if you're interested in like just understanding police and fire, we could break that one out and show you.
No, it's not about police and fire,
Okay.
it's just a
No, no, no.
question of, are you not from, we're not doing it out of this pot anymore, in this pot, we're taking it out of a different pot, but what is the actual increase or decrease is the fundamental information, I think, for decision makers. Are you getting more money overall or less?
Okay, well,
Year over year.
let's work through the budget and hopefully that will become clearer, and if we need to follow up, Amy, we can. Okay.
I have a few general questions before the
Mhm.
departments. One, I know that this was a very quick project because of lots of reasons. And so next year, I'm sure it's gonna be even better. But the information that's in here is particularly related to revenue projections. Traditionally, is that something that you're gonna be including in the binder that we get ahead of time?
Yeah. Yeah.
And generally about the rearranging of the PERS expense, can you explain again why you think it's better for it to be under each department rather than having it be like a separate lump sum that we're looking at?
You want to talk about transfers and all that?
Well, typically, because it is an employee expense, and you put all your employee expenses in your departments except for the unfunded liability. So we've allocated just unfunded liability by each employee and then put it back in the department. So you can get a true picture of what each department is spending on salary and benefits. And actually, going forward, you can actually break it down farther so you can see actually all the benefits by line item that each department is paying out as well. But it's just it's a truer picture. I mean, the way that they did it prior, and it's not wrong, it's just that they would just lump sum it out of the general fund. And so it was just like a total general fund cost, so you didn't really get a good idea of how much each department was paying towards their unfunded liability.
I'm still a little confused by it, because it's not like, I mean, I don't see a department budgets, but it's, if the department didn't pay for it, the city would still have to pay for it. So it's, at the end of the day, it's a liability that
Right.
the city has to pay, even if the department no longer existed.
Part of the thought process is when you're looking at these program budgets, it's really, you're looking at your cost centers. So the question is, what does it cost you to deliver police services? If you don't have the unfunded PERS liability within that police, then you really don't have the full costs of what it's doing. We already have like so that's the reason you typically really want to put, where you can, all your costs in that cost center, so you understand what it costs you to deliver that service. But I do think the world of PERS and some other, this is an area that clearly council needs to understand, kind of what that looks like. In my last agency, we actually had some sections of the budget that really kind of outline that, explain some in better detail. where you could look at it just as one cost center versus having it spread. So part of it is there's a way as we really kind of work on updating the budget document to have some reference information for you that really is helpful to council members of the public.
Yeah, because I can just see overall, seeing it all together, I think strategically it's easy to think about, but then I also see as far as the historic cost of a particular service, I would need to review a little bit.
Agreed. Any other general questions before we walk? It's a bit of a fire hose, Raul, thanks. So go through. All right, so let's go, the first budgets we're gonna walk through and is council. So if you look on page 4, and I'm gonna walk through a few of these budgets for you at a high level. Okay, so page 5 just gives everyone a little background about the council, how it's structured. Some of the changes to this budget is based on what our current council, what benefits they chose. There was a reduction in some of the benefits. Again, there is an inclusion of that unfunded liability in here as well. I put an addition of an outside facilitator to assist with council retreats, similar to where we had Sherry Lund. And also, in the future, if council wants to do an evaluation of the city manager or city attorney, so you can have an outside facilitator who can help facilitate that process. It's the best practice I've seen. So I did add some funding into the budget on that. There were also some memberships within this budget that I felt really belonged more in line departments. These were like the Sonoma County Transportation Agency was in the council's budget. I felt like that really should be in Public Works. And then the Regional Climate Protection Authority is another, there's a membership cost for that, and that's really the project, that's planning, that they are managing those, so we moved that. And then there was a minor increase that, to allow council to either go to the 2017 League Conference in one or another innovative conference. So overall, there was a reduction in the council budget with those modifications.
You know, the council has a discretionary budget that we can apply to different projects throughout the year. Where is that shown?
That's in the community activities and the community fund grant program.
What is central administration? I'm just looking at the org chart on page 3, where central administration is over the city council.
So central administration, actually, it's probably, that probably shouldn't be there. Central administration is the name for this category, just as it's really a category of where to put city council, city clerk, city manager, legal, and finance, kind of the administrative services of the organization.
That's the title of the
It's the
document.
title of that section, really, for lack of a better term.
I was like, who do we report to?
If you saw the big city budget org chart shows the citizens
Yes.
on top and then the council. Okay, so moving on then from council, city clerk, I'd ask Rebecca to come up and briefly walk you through the city clerk budget.
Oh, I think Madeline.
Oh, Madam, do you have a
Yeah,
question?
I do. Could I ask about in the revenue and expenditure detail, what is professional service?
Professional services are like contracts.
And who might take them?
So this is, I added in for city council $15,000. There was a $500, so I added $14,500 just for a placeholder to hire like an outside facilitator for the retreat. If you want to do evaluation, again, it's city manager, city attorney.
Okay.
That's kind of a placeholder and a good practice.
And 700E, internal service.
Internal service charges, we have those for building maintenance, vehicles, and management information systems. And so we have the
So we just
council
have to
office.
re-share.
There's a share of it that
Okay,
comes into
thank
this
you.
budget as well. Thank you. Turn to city clerk.
Before you is the city clerk's narrative and budget for the year. At the beginning, as you can see, you have the description of what a city clerk is, what the office is responsible for. Really, the city clerk, really we support the city council in your goals of innovation, transparency, and fairness. And what really are the liaison between the community and the city a lot of times. We, in our department, we're responsible for really making sure that the we do have a Public Records Act, so we do request the records management, oversee the records management, the elections official for the city, commission support administration, and we staff, in this city, we staff the Cultural and Fine Arts Commission as well. There are a lot of things that aren't listed here that are other, such as the legislation, official disclosure, Political Reform Act, receiving statements, campaign filings, that type of thing. Some of the accomplishments for this last year, some of the big ones was the conducting of the election for the 2 council seats and the 3 ballot measures in consolidation with the county. The implementation of the paperless meeting system, meeting management system, including a way that you receive your packets. You're now doing that by iPad. And with this next council meeting, we'll be launching officially the Civic Web Portal, which will be the community and council and the place to find all your meeting-related content. Also, it will have continue to build that archive and library for documents for individuals in the public if they want to be able to access those records of the city. Also, as far as some of the goals that we're going to, one of the things the city clerk's office is going to serve as the project manager for the new city's website. And we're going to continue that, adding the additional information for the civic web portal, including a commissions and committees portal, which you'll see coming in the next few months. Then also, if we do proceed with the 2017 special election for a revenue measure, and also we will be having a audit done of our records and our records program and policies to make sure that all of our retention guidelines and citations are updated and stay in compliance with state and federal laws, local laws. Then we'll be doing the implementing the new commissions and committees process if we make a change there. And then also we'll be looking at the FPPC Statement of Economic Interest and our Conflict of Interest Code to make sure that we are in compliance with that.
So, I just, a couple of things. I know, Kathy, you touched on this issue of inclusion of PERS unfunded, da-da-da. So I'm so glad, Rachel, that you asked about this because it's a connecting thread throughout the whole budget process. So now we don't have to ask, what is that anymore? Thanks.
Some of the key changes, there aren't really any major modifications to the budget. A couple of the key things are, there was a removal of one-time funds of $10,000 that was put in the budget last year to cover the overlap between myself and the previous city clerk. And that has been removed. And then, as you said, the PERS unfunded liability, there's a very small increase in the elections for this TOT based on the estimate from the county. A small increase of $3,000. And then just minor increases in costs for our municipal code contract, advertising for public noticing, and then training conferences is a very minor increase.
So the documents that are gonna be available to the public, is that gonna include our resolutions and proclamations from the past?
It will, eventually, yeah. Our resolutions, I believe, will be, as far as we have back, they're one of the first documents that will be up. And the proclamations, if we have them, they will go. Anything that we have going forward, anything that goes through the council packet, so it will be automatically, as it goes in through the process of the meeting management system, it's automatically OCR and immediately becomes circular to the public. And that will include proclamations, resolution ordinances, agreements. If we have them going back, that they will be added.
And do you know why so the 10,000 that's getting taken out, why it was classified as overtime?
I don't.
But it wasn't actually charged as overtime, they just stuck it there.
Yeah.
Just
Yeah.
to-
It was not overtime, it was this overlap. The way that our budgeting software works, there's a variety of roll-up. You put these line items as a roll-up, and sometimes it rolls up to things that, so. Any other questions?
What other departments, what other departments, what percent of your time falls under this department?
As far as the city clerk, as far as actual hours?
No, I
or-
just mean like if you look at the proposed budget, it's not your full salary, so that means that a portion of your time is attributed to another department. So I'm just wondering what percent of your time, maybe you don't know, what percent of your time?
She doesn't know. We've looked at that, and we can pull it out. So there is a bit that goes to the successor agency as a city clerk, and so we can answer that question in a minute.
Is that the only other agency that she's in? That's the only other department?
I don't recall off the top. I'd be happy to, we have the position allocation, so we can share that document with council. Any other? Okay. All right, thank you, Rebecca. Now, the next section is page 13, city managers piece. So, I won't belabor, go through this. I think so these accomplishments reflect Carol's time for the first 6 months and my time coming through January. I think we've done collectively a lot of good work. Some of the goals for next year really will be creating this 5-year plan. We are in negotiations and developing a 5-year plan. Some of the other pieces really will be looking at our communication tools so also the farmers market project, looking at what the next phase of that will be. We'll be updating our special events policy, and there's the city manager's budget reflects not only city manager's office, it also reflects our human resources and risk management oversight. So Kathy Lanning as administrative services manager, a piece of her is in this budget as well. So any of our HR costs, recruitments are also included in the manager's office. So some of the key changes here, there were some personnel allocation shifting. There is a portion of the new assistant city manager, administrative services director goes in this budget and finance. So that's part of the addition as well. Again, the unfunded liability. There is labor negotiations, there's part funding in this year, but we will be continuing to do labor negotiations in next year. So there are some costs for labor negotiation, there's some addition for executive training, and then I've also just put $15,000 for professional services, just as there's some flexibility based on what might come up. And then there's some decreases, because if you recall, we had the executive recruiter for the city manager, the executive recruiter for the finance director, some of those one-time costs have been taken off. So any questions on the city managers?
Yeah, I have a question about the outside labor negotiator for $15,000. And my understanding is that in past years, the city manager has negotiated a contract.
No. At least in the last couple of years, we've had an outside negotiator. So 2 years ago, we had an outside negotiator. We're using the same outside negotiator this year. And frankly, it's a good practice to have an outside negotiator because, as the manager, if I'm sitting at the table and trying to work things through, maybe there's some things that we don't want to do right then and there. They're negotiating, they're having those conversations, they come to me, because I've been in closed sessions with the councils to say, okay, I think this could probably work. It creates a little bit of a layer that's important to be clear that this is what negotiation is, this is the executive policy direction from the council. And it's a fairly modest.
Who is the negotiator?
We use a retiree, Chris Sliz, with RGS,
How do you spell last name?
SLIZ. Yeah, and typically, the manager's not sitting at the table. You have an outside negotiator, there's a variety of, and someone who has done this routinely. Sometimes it's frankly an attorney as well that does labor negotiations. Sometimes it's someone who comes out of a labor relations expertise and has basically been at the table.
Yeah, I was a union organizer for 5 years. I've been at labor negotiations many times.
Yeah.
But in general, someone from management is present.
Someone from management is present, so Kathy is present at the table, and then when they need to caucus or come out, they come out and talk to me, and then they go back to the table. Okay. So any other questions on city manager?
For the increase in training and conferences, do you have things already in mind, or are you just making some room for opportunities as they come
I
up?
do, there's a couple things. One, I think it's important to have have Kathy as our HR person to go to. There's a great employee relations personnel conference every year. There was not funding really budgeted for some of that. And I put in some funding for professional training for myself to go to. There's the City Manager League Conference, to go to the League of California Cities annual conference with whatever council members are going. So when I looked at this line item, it was fairly thin. So. So the next is legal services, and I'll go through this one as well. Legal services is kind of, there's a lot in this. It's not just your typical city attorney services. So this is, we contract with Walter Pistol. Jeff Walters is our lead attorney. And so those city attorney services are here. But in addition, we have our city prosecutor, our youth and family services program, and code enforcement are in this program as well. So there's quite a background here in terms of some of the accomplishments and background goals for the programs. And Bob Smith, who is the city prosecutor and runs youth and family and code enforcement, is on vacation, unable to be here. But I have been talking to Bob to have him come sometime this summer, early fall, to do a presentation and an update to council. So the changes here, the main change, frankly, is just within basic legal services. There is not a change to any of the contracts with Bob Smith and those programs. There's an addition for general legal, and there's addition for, I've also put in about $10,000 in legal costs. So about $50,000 I've put in as a placeholder for Walter and Pistol, based on really what has been the actual for the past couple of years and what we're seeing currently this year. I've also added $10,000 because there are some policies and procedures we need to look at based on our human resources policies that I think need to be updated, and that we have a special legal counsel to review. So happy to answer any questions on.
Sure, I'm on page 18, fiscal year 2017, and I think, the paragraph starts with, additionally, we look to expanding our visibility in the community to provide more opportunity for citizen dispute resolution. I'm surprised by this Sonoma County that there is nothing really here. There may be one small organization, and I'm happy to see that we're doing something, because a few counties that I know of have organizations that do that. They even have dispute resolutions between cities. So it's a shame that Sonoma the county isn't involved in that. And I'm happy about this. This is something that I've always wanted, and I think it was one of my goals. So it would be great if we could see the type of dispute resolutions that Bob Smith gets involved in. It would be nice to see.
Yeah, so the city prosecutor program has been around for quite some time, but there definitely is a dispute resolution entity about it. Some cities I've worked for, so there's two things. City prosecutor does some of that dispute resolution, but they also prosecute those kind of low-hanging citations, and Clerk can talk more about this, that typically you would send to the DA's office and they just dismiss them. They don't have time or resources to deal with them.
So who has replaced Cynthia Ashmore with Youth and Family Services? I guess I've lost track of that.
You know, I'll let, do you know?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I mean, if you want, so, last year was a kind of a restructuring of the programs. Cynthia Ashmore had been the assistant city prosecutor and also was a program manager for Youth and Family Services. It was a 20-hour week for each of the two positions. That her time in the courthouse was getting more and more demanding in terms of all the appearances she was making on behalf of the city prosecutor. Again, the city prosecutor tries all the misdemeanors that occur in the city for the most part, and all city code violations, which the DA's office aren't responsible for trying. And so what happened is when Bob became more available, he stepped into handling more of the youth and family service diversion stuff, and released Cynthia to spend the majority of her time, restructured her agreement with them, and spends the majority of her time, or all of her time, basically at the courthouse dealing
Oh, I see.
with that stuff. And then when you brought on the code enforcement, of course, that's Patrick Galvin who does that.
Thank you.
So is the city attorney contract included in this section?
It is.
So what's the, I'm having a hard time seeing the breakup between the three.
Yeah, so, so the overall, basically each of, it's about, each of the three programs that's run by Bob Smith they're each about 60,000. One's 65, they're all about 62, they're all in the 60s, low 60s, the three of them. So it's about 185,000 the city is putting in youth and family services, code enforcement, and, city prosecutor. And then there's about another 200,000, which is set aside for, that's going towards kind of your general attorney legal, which is Walter Pistol. I think there's another 10 to 15,000 for human resources.
So, Kathy, may I interject? And maybe that wasn't the question, but it's also important to point out that the Youth and Family Service Program is equally funded between the city and the sheriff. So that program cost, I think it's about 60,000, but it's shared equally between the city and the county.
Oh, that's, I have my.
So in this budget, is there 30 for that program then, or is there 60?
There's 60 in the revenue, is within the revenue budget, it's within the general fund.
So we pay 60 and then we get reimbursed 30?
Yes.
And as far as, the contract with the city attorney, what's the times around that? I can't remember last time we negotiated or discussed it, is that?
I don't know, to be honest, I don't know if it's a rolling year, I looked at it when I first came on board to understand it, but I don't have that detail. Any other questions on legal? I think the only other thing that, as we look at legal this next year, we may want to look at whether we put in a policy where we look at charging developers a piece of any development costs that are related. That is typically a practice that occurs. It's not something that we have, so they don't have their general fund absorbing some of those development costs. We can set policy parameters on that. Maybe we want them to cover the costs, kind of the general costs. Maybe once you get to an appeal, the council wants to have the general fund cover the cost of the appeal, because that's not necessarily, kind of the developer's process. Those things happen, but there's different ways to do that. Surveying some of the cities, it looks like 90% of the cities do have some form of developer reimbursement for legal costs.
Because we wouldn't be in that, doing that, so providing that service if it wasn't for the project.
So it's kind of a fee for service, and there's a cost, and you can do a direct reimbursement, and something, that's, I mean, part of what's occurring is just with development projects moving forward, we're seeing the legal costs associated go up. So that's something we can look at next year. Finance, Sue?
So finance, Kathy talked a little bit about the possible reorganization of the department. In 16-17, the department had, they had 2 accounting technicians, an administrative clerk, part-time administrative clerk, and then the finance director. And typically in finance, it's difficult to have a finance director who's at a higher level and then they have 2 administrative clerks. So she was doing all the high-end kind of work. She was preparing the budget, doing the financial forecasting, doing the audit, which takes a tremendous amount of time. So there was kind of a, like there's a huge kind of gap in between the clerks and the finance director. So she had a tremendous job to do. And so by reorganizing the department so that you have a administrative services director and then a finance manager, then you have that second level of like a professional accountant who can come in and do some of that kind of work. So it just makes the department structure a lot easier, and really it reorganizes the work so that all the work can get done.
I think the other thing to remember is that the city, when part of our partnership with Valley Inland Fire District 2, the finance director provides financial services helps keep the books for the fire district as well. I mean, there's pieces they do, but there's also that role, treasurer, et cetera. So there is additional work within this department too for kind of outside of our own entity.
And then the other piece is the financial accounting software that the city implemented about 4 years ago. During the implementation, again, as Kathy mentioned, the finance director who was in the middle of implementing left, and so it was kind of left in a state of half implementation. And so there's a lot of things that really could be implemented and could really help the entire city as well as the finance department use the accounting software for what it was intended to do. So, but that's probably going to be almost like a whole new implementation. You're going to have to kind of start at the beginning. We'll do an audit of the whole city, see how it's being used, how does the finance department using it, was the general ledger set up correctly, and take a look at that and then kind of move forward as you would doing a whole implementation with the software. I've used Springbrook at other cities. It does a lot more than it does here. It has a lot more capability. So
I think the missing piece was conversion, and that's the yucky part.
Right.
Isn't it? It's really the yucky part of what happens.
Right.
And unfortunately, it's like strategic planning, and then you have something else, and they put it up on a shelf. And they go, well, we have this, but we don't use it, so
Right.
it's unfortunate.
Yeah, so that's going to be a big process for the finance department going forward, and for the city as well. And then there's quite a few things that for 17-18, the goals, we want to take a look at the reserve fund policy, as we mentioned, and then there's a couple other fund policies that we want to bring back to council as well. We want to implement a 5-year forecast to help with strategic planning. It's always related to your strategic planning, but the financial piece is a very important factor. 5-year capital improvement plan. We don't really have a true capital improvement plan here, or even a capital improvement system. So going forward, part of the implementation of Springbrook would be to implement purchase orders and encumbrances, so you can actually go from year to year and see what your true rollover balance is, instead of just kind of, it's all in the general fund, you have to rebudget it every year. So that'll give you a real true picture of what's happening in your general fund as well as your CIP. Of course, the water rate study and a cost allocation plan, that's a really important piece of public works as well. And for the entire city, a cost allocation plan is something that really helps you moving forward, and also with your strategic and financial planning. And then the CAFR, we need to finish the 15-16 CAFR and then move on to 16-17. That's a large amount of work for the finance department. And then 18-19 budget. And once you finish the budget for 17-18, you're already on the 18-19 budget. And then we want to identify a lot of cross-training opportunities for the finance department. So.
May I ask a question?
Sure.
So here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The 5th bullet point, initiate the development of a plan for resolution of deficit in cemetery fund. Is there anything set aside to do that, or is just any funds to be able to?
Not at this point. What we've got is, we have our financial, we're setting aside $100,000 for financial sustainability. We're programmed so far 75. We have a study that was done some time ago that, as we've talked about, we kind of need to take out and dust off. But there, as we look at things, there could be some additional capacity to come back and look there. So I don't know, again, we don't know exactly what this looks like, but this is something to at least try to understand how could we move forward on what this looks like.
I'd like to take this moment just for a second to talk about, we've all kind of talked about maybe having a 2-year budget in the future. When it comes to the budget and the costs for the finance director, would there be any benefits or advantages to that, or would it be a disadvantage?
I think there would be an advantage to doing a 2-year budget. I think we're small enough and clean enough we could do that. I think we're probably 2 years away from doing that. Ideally, I think we'd also want to do it when you've just had a council election, you've got your new council coming in, and you're kind of setting a 2-year. So there would be a timing we'd want to look at. So that the new council is able to kind of take their 2-year blessing on it. The other way I've seen it done where you do 2 year, you focus 1 year on operating, and then you're doing minor changes to operating the second year, and then the second year you're really looking at CIP in a greater detail and doing a broader infrastructure.
Yeah, so to implement that, would we have, the council, would we have to put that as an agenda item, or is that just something that we talk during the budget?
I think we could talk through next year, we could see, we wouldn't be ready, I doubt we'd be ready next year, but it's definitely, I would love to go there, yeah.
Is the PERS amount a uniform percentage by department?
No.
No.
No, it's based on salary and how many people are in the department, so there's a whole allocation process for that.
Oh, 'cause I just went back to the fire and police and I was looking and the fire is, the actual increase is only 34% of the total increase of salary increases, so the majority is, so it just depends on how much the people there make, it's not.
Well, the fire and the,
Police are a little different.
yeah, they're different because they're on, they're separate contracts, so when they split off from the city, it's really the residual that of the unfunded
Okay,
liability.
I don't have to ask now, but
We need to really,
I think there's a real, to really understand PERS, there's kind of a PERS 101 you gotta do. And it's a good hour and a half conversation to really understand where you've been, what it looks like. One of the things we have in the finance budget is to, best practice is to have an actual audit, not an audit, an actuarial assessment. So PERS does these actuarials, but then you also, every couple of years, you wanna bring in your own actuarial to review and come talk to council about this is what your PERS looks like, to update and really look at, and they will help provide numbers for a 5-year forecast out. So this is a place where, PERS costs are increasing. Our city, we've been very modest in terms of the PERS formulas that have been offered compared to other places, so we're in a much better place than a lot of agencies. But still, there are gonna be some increases, and you all need to understand that as policymakers. So that's something for this next year. We'll have, a gentleman by the name of John Bartel is kind of the expert. Have John come do a presentation to council, give you some update, and we'll really do some grounding. You'll need to understand a little bit of this also as we go into labor negotiations.
So are police and fire out with PERS?
Yeah, so here's what
That's what
happens.
I
So
thought,
basically,
okay.
there are four,
'Cause
we
I
have
can't-
4 plans. So we have 4 plans as a city. We have we have a police plan with PERS and a fire plan. We no longer have employees that are paying into that, but we still have employees that are gonna retire at some point out of those plans. So the city is still making contributions into those plan funds. That is where the annual unfunded liability comes every year, and that's adjusted. Then we have for the non-police fire, they call it miscellaneous employees, that's kind of the rest of us. And miscellaneous employees, there's folks in the 2% of 55 formula, and then there's folks in the state lower rate PEPR formula. And there's 2 different rates, and there's basically no unfunded liability in the new PEPR rate. It's way confusing, sorry.
Where's SEIU in this?
SEIU is within the miscellaneous. So we'll need to kind of do a little PERS 101, there's a whole language. Honestly, in terms of with police and fire, they are in the county's retirement system. The county's retirement system has done better than PERS in the last few years, it is better funded. And so financially, I think the city's in better off, but from having to make, for a variety of reasons, contracting police and fire and having those agencies be in a non-PERS retirement program.
The increase in management information services or the software, what's the lifespan of, like doing something like this? So $40,000 now to get the most out of this fancy software we bought, how long does that last?
well, hopefully it upgrades, so that along the way, it's still upgrading itself, and so if you're implemented correctly, then, every year, what you get the upgrades for the software. And so, it can have a lifespan of, as long as you want to use the software, unless for some reason that particular company goes out of business or stops, supporting that particular software.
Is
But
this a
if-
popular program?
Yes, it is. Many smaller cities use it in the area. It's mid-level. It's not, and you don't want to have a system that's too big for the city because it's cumbersome and you really aren't going to use all the pieces of it. Springbrook is really, for this particular size of city, it's pretty common.
Yeah, and the bottom line on big installations like this, frankly, you either bring someone extra staff in on the front end to do it, that's really what you do, or you have to clean up in the back end. And so, a lot of times cities, for all the right reasons, will try just to do these big installs by not bringing someone else in, and you can't. My last agency, we were just doing the major finance, and we hired an accounting supervisor for a year, because someone's gotta run the operation, someone's gotta be putting in this, because you're running two systems at the same time. So financial systems are very complicated, and I think the city was trying just to be frugally careful, but just, and then with people leaving, we end up with this gap. So I think with fairly minor amount of money overall, we can get this system working and hopefully be on the system for a good 5+ years. So let's shift to public safety. I might switch and do police first. So let's go ahead and do you first, and then, yep, come on, please. Welcome to the hot seat. All right. So we are on page 39, thank you.
39.
All right.
Madam Mayor, members of the council, thank you for having us come before you today. As you know about the police department, I'll give you a little bit of background, you can read it as well, but obviously the police department is responsible for the protection of life and property, maintenance of order, control and prevention of crime, and enforcement of motor vehicle laws and regulations. I do believe that we play an important role in helping and hopefully improving maintaining the quality of life here in our city of Sonoma. As has been mentioned before, since 2004, the city has contracted with Sonoma County Sheriff's Office for law enforcement services. We are in the second iteration of that contract, which is due to expire in June of 2018, so not this year, but probably the following year we'll be talking about an extension. Per that agreement, I provide the city with a service plan each year, which we're working on now, based a lot on the service delivery and the budget. We talk about staffing levels, schedules, training needs, programs that we're going to offer, vehicles and maintenance and that kind of stuff. Overall, we're a fairly small shop. Police department has a total staff of 16.5 employees, which consists, of course, of myself, 2 sergeants, 10 deputy sheriffs, 2 community service officers, an administrative assistant, and a part-time administrative clerk. Under the contract, there's a blended supervision model, which you can see kind of outlined in the diagram. So there are 2 sergeants at the Valley Substation, and of course 2 sergeants here at the police department. So they share in the supervision, street level supervision of calls for service and so on and so forth. So we basically have coverage for the most part from about 7 a.m. all the way to about 9 or 10 o'clock in the evening. There's a sergeant usually on duty here in the valley or somewhere in the city. In the absence of one of those, or when they go home, the contract allows us to rely upon supervision of the main office. So there's always a sergeant on duty all times at the sheriff's main office who listens and monitors and of course notifies if need be in terms of resource needs. The police department also utilizes a cadre of dedicated volunteers through our VIP program. And under the sheriff's contract, many of our professional, administrative, and managerial functions, such as dispatch, investigations, fiscal and records management, and property evidence, are handled by subject matter experts that are located at the sheriff's main office in Santa Rosa. And I think this would be a good opportunity for me to actually identify 3 of them are here in the audience with us. So Lene Mann, and Marta Peavy, and also Crystal Carey Harrow. They're all part of our fiscal team. And what I would like to point out is, as fate would have it, today is the sheriff's budget hearings with the Board of Supervisors. And most fiscal staff has been assigned to be there to support the discussions at the board chambers. The sheriff's committed to his contract cities, and so he released, I would think, the 3 best to come out here and to be part of this if need be. They're the ones who really kind of help put together kind of the numbers associated with the contract. And at the risk of sounding too corny, I really think that we got the Steph Curry, Kevin Durant, and the Draymond the fiscal team with us today. So I thank the sheriff for that. So as we go through the accomplishments, first and foremost, I think we managed a law enforcement services contract with the county to ensure a high delivery of public service and high quality of fiscal accountability. We successfully recruited and selected and trained a new school resource officer who just completed his first year. I'm excited to let you know I did, of course, meet with all of you about a month ago and went over my annual report, so this is probably a little bit old hat, but he did complete his first year and he agreed to sign on again, so the students didn't run him out the door, which was good.
Is this Eric?
Eric Smith, yeah, doing a great job down there. We also completed the purchase and setup of the new EOC laptops, which are over in that little room right there. She and Kathy's using one now. That came out of a grant from the Department of Homeland Security in partnership with the fire department. As you know, we've actively participated in numerous public education and community outreach programs, whether it's the every 15-minute program, Coffee with a Cop. I've done numerous public speaking engagements regarding immigration, specifically in the Valley. As you point out tonight, I will be doing that again as well as all part of kind of the public outreach part. In terms of our goals for the following year, of course, obviously, first and foremost, is to manage the contract to get the best service for the best price. We want to explore some new technology to enhance the safety and enforcement, perhaps through either automatic license plate readers or vehicle locators or maybe some cameras that would be kind of a force multiplier for us in terms of kind of keeping track of things. Study the feasibility of handling our parking citation review in-house. We currently, and it's been around for 25 years, I believe, in partnership with many cities, actually work with the county for parking enforcement. There's a lot of components to that in terms of review, so every parking citation that comes in, people have a right, of course, to appeal those. So there's a whole appeal process that's handled by the county. All the notifications of the Department of Motor Vehicles, the collection of money, the distribution to 10 different pots of money. So there's kind of a big chunk of work being done at the county level. But we do want to see if that's something that we can bring in-house to increase the revenue generation for the city. And likewise, you'll see in the budget part, we had an increase in vehicle maintenance costs. We currently contract with county fleet maintenance for not only the leasing or the purchasing of our vehicles, but also the maintenance. We did see an increase in the maintenance costs. That's a little bit concerning to me. I have been in discussions with the fire department, the chief specifically, as well as their mechanic, to see if there's some way that they have enough bandwidth to start doing some work on our cars as well. So I think we're going to slowly kind of roll that out this year just to see what that looks like in terms of is there going to be any savings and will there be loss of service and will overburden the fire department. So that'll be something we'll be looking at. And then also, I tried to do it this year, I just couldn't get it off the ground, but I really, I'm part of that community outreach. We really hope to hold the first annual Sonoma Valley, City of Sonoma Citizens Advisory, or excuse me, Citizens Police Academy. And I think it'd be a great opportunity to really kind of talk about what we do, model off of what the Sheriff's Department does. But in talking with the sheriff, as you know, many people in Sonoma just find it too difficult to get all the way to Santa Rosa. And so if we can bring that program to them, I think we'll be very successful in kind of explaining kind of what we do out here. So in terms of the history of the contract, there's a chart in there. As you can see, this year there has been a considerable increase in the contract cost. But I went back over the last 10 years. And so if you remember, as I said, in 2004, the city contract, it was a 5-year contract. From 2004 2009. I was the chief at that time. In 2009, we negotiated a 10-year extension to that. So I just kind of went back and looked at the last basically 8 years of the sheriff's contract, just kind of take a look at kind of what it's looking like in terms of cost increase. As you can see, over the course of the last 8 years, it's gone up and gone down. During economic downturns, the labor unions did in fact take some concessions, so there was a reduction of cost of contract during those years. Some of them have been very modest, but overall it's been about a 22% increase over the last 8 years, which is just shy of about 2.5% per year in terms of kind of overall cost. This year, of course, the contract increased to about $337,000. If you look at the recommendations for the budget increases, it does look like a big number, $506,000. I think some of it's been explained. There's been the inclusion of the prior unfunded and PERS contributions for employees that no longer work for us, that had been, I guess, captured in maybe non-departmental, but they decided for cost accounting to put it in each individual budget. So that's, that was an increase of about $153,000. As I mentioned, the sheriff's contract was $337,000 more. That's broken down, salaries and benefits of about 6.5% increase, which includes a 3% COLA. But when you have a COLA increase for your staff, of course, all the roll-up costs, for those people who are familiar with it in terms of overtime expense and specialties, that all kind of includes. So it really turned out to be about 6.5%. And then there was an increase in administrative overhead of about $108,000. Administrative overhead is charged only to salary and benefits. Administrative overhead is really for all those things that are done kind of in the back of the house, as I mentioned already previously. So all of our records management and property evidence, fiscal team, personnel, access to county council, dispatching services, you name it, that's all captured under our overhead. But the overhead rate is still fairly low, it's about 26.4%. And then, as I mentioned, the last kind of increase comes from the maintenance cost of the vehicles. So those is something that we hope to address this year and see if there's a more economical way to take care of our cars. So, I think that pretty much kind of covers. Oh, but I did want to say, kind of kudos to the sheriff again. He can't be here, of course, but one of the things he did this year, he understood this contract was higher than probably what anybody wanted, including himself. So one of the things that we looked at creative ways, and we talked about other options with the city staff, but they decided this year to charge 20% of my salary off to the Valley substation, because I do provide managerial oversight to the Valley sub, and so I thought that was kind of a nice ethical way of kind of sharing costs for management and oversight of kind of a law enforcement model here in the Valley. So, and hereby kind of concludes.
So that's related to a question I had about the relationship between city services that you provide and what's going on in the valley. So that's, sounds like they are thinking about some sort of cost allocation model, but how does the rest of it work as far as, you know, people are out patrolling and?
Yeah, so basically the city contracts for a certain level of service. There's 10 deputies. When you think about that, that's basically 5 on each end of the week, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So it's not a huge staff. The Valley substation has 12 deputies assigned. The city PD guys spend probably 90% of their time working directly in the city of Sonoma. There are times when they float outside the city of Sonoma for call for service. And I think if you were a victim of a crime, somebody's banging on your door, you don't really care what the patch says, you just want someone to show up there and get the situation stabilized. But on the flip side, the city benefits quite a bit as well, because we are the major hub. We probably actually have sheriff's deputies in here providing law enforcement services more than the city cops are providing services out there. So there is kind of an advantage to that. The blended supervision model, of course, I think is important in terms of having 4 sergeants available to provide, supervising oversight to call for service, scheduling issues, and so on and so forth. There are a couple other programs. The school resource officer program is equally funded by the school district, the city, and the sheriff. The school resource officer position, although he spends most of his time probably in the city, arguably should be assigned to the city, but we have agreed to assign him to the Valley substation because we don't pay overhead rates on deputies assigned over there, so it's the most economical way to deliver that service to the people here in the city. So that's kind of.
So is data as far as, for example, the deputies, is that data tracked as to where people are spending their time?
I wouldn't say it's tracked per se. Obviously, every year we're doing crime stats in terms of how many arrests were made and reports were taken and calls for service. It's tracked that way, and it's tracked by geographical location. So I know for a fact what's going on in the city. It's a little more nebulous in the valley, because the valley is oftentimes included with the rest of the county, right? So, but yeah, so it's a little more nuanced, I think.
And my last question, so you said the contract is expiring June 2018? 19. So I guess this is the second time it's going to be discussed again, but how far out does that conversation start?
So my thought, I was looking at the contract, there doesn't say anything about needing to start, crazy early. I would think soon after budget hearing 18-19, we would roll right into it. So we would have basically from July, or July 1 of 2018 through June 30, 2019 to get it dialed in.
Just wondering on page 41, the increase in the overhead, 108,773. What does 13.5% mean on there? Does it mean a 13.5% increase?
From the previous year.
Oh, cool. That seems like a large increase, so why?
So, and they might be able to better answer that question, but in essence, the overhead rate is a function of the sheriff's administration budget. So we had been, during the economic downturns, the places that were cut most were basically office staff. And so we are finally kind of getting up, I believe, up to staff in terms of people in personnel and internal affairs and training, physical team, records management, that kind of stuff. And so that's probably why we're seeing the increase.
So just to make sure I understood what you said, we don't have more employees in Sonoma, but the sheriff and the county has more employees, and that theoretically benefits us here, so we're paying, our share is 13.5%.
Correct.
And then my other question is, on the cameras and license plate readers, what does that mean?
So one of the things that Kathy and I have been discussing, a lot of agencies have found a great benefit for using technology. And so whether it's license plate readers, and there's a variety of different ways to do it. For instance, there's a Bay Area city that has a one way in, one way out, and they have license plate readers and the only entrance, so they can control every car that comes and goes out. So if there is a crime that occurs, they have some record of who that might be. Many agencies, even in Sonoma County, have license plate readers that are directly on their patrol cars. They're driving around constantly reading license plates, and so vehicles that are known to be stolen or wanted, instead of having a deputy to recognize that plate being wanted, the computer's doing it for you. And so it's been a huge benefit in terms of data collection for recovering of stolen vehicles and wanted people. And then in the event that sometimes we're a reactive team in terms of you get a call for service and you roll out there and then you find out the car already left, well, we can go back and check what cars we need to pass to see if it happens to be one that. Cameras, I know there's a camera on First Street East in East Napa, which ironically has played a key role in 3 or 4 major cases for us, including the infamous body in the barrel case. That was captured, that vehicle was captured on that particular camera. The company we work for was very helpful in helping us get that data, and they've been very helpful in a lot of different ways. And so just being smart about using technology as a force multiplier, because as I mentioned, there's only 5 deputies on any given end of the week, so we have about 2 guys working or 2 people working each and every day. So it can't be all places at all times.
I'll tell you, from my perspective, I'm categorically against the government recording all of our activities, and I'm deeply uncomfortable with paying for that. And if I had to choose, I mean, it's just a, ideological thing. I just don't think the government has the right to record us at all times for not doing any crimes. And it is great to catch people who are doing crimes, but for those of us who aren't doing crimes, I don't think we should be surveilled. I think that's, not the prevailing thought amongst most governments at this time, but I feel very strongly about that. And if we had to pick between 2 items, and one is, a free soccer clinic for kids or surveilling everybody in hopes of catching a few criminals, I would pick free soccer.
So there's no funding budgeted for this currently. Agencies, as communities, have different feelings on this. So what we want to do is explore some of the technology. I think there's also ways to figure out how long do you keep that technology, and so you can record, and how long do you keep those records is a way sometimes to deal with some privacy concerns that community members have. I personally have also seen, as the interim manager in Nevada, this technology helped us solve a very horrific crime that I think would not have been solved otherwise. So, and again, when you've got really thin staffing, but I can appreciate the sentiment. So what we're gonna do is explore and look at some different models, and then if we think that's something that we think could be helpful, we'll bring it forward to council, and we'll have a robust conversation about it.
Last question. As a British detective crazy person, every time something happens, see what CCTV says, right? Tells you. So I know that, and I hear the other part of that. Could I ask just a few quick questions? The every 15 minutes, where do you get the funding for that?
So the funding from various locations is
Okay.
changed from year to year. We try to throw that program every other year, and we
That's
get
what
the
I
juniors and
understand.
seniors. The funding comes from the Office of Traffic Safety, State Office of Traffic Safety. Some of that money, I believe, also comes from NHTSA, which is the National Highway Safety Institute. It is all for basically education programs, particularly around drunk driving and now texting and driving. So we get funding from that. Usually it's around $10,000. It was a little bit less this particular year. Speedway Children's Charities have been helpful. The Rotary's been helpful with us. We're in a position where we're probably going to need to do some fundraising or find some additional funds, and if we're going to be able to pull the program off as we have in the past.
So it's not just one agency that it's time to do it, and we'll send you all the money? Okay.
And it really is a big, huge community thing in terms of the fire department's heavily involved, the courts, the hospital, the school district, of course, plays a huge role in it, so.
Thank you. Let's see, I just wanted, it's continued support of numerous community events. I guess I just wanted to check, your reimbursed, some of the fees are waived, but your department, is it, they're reimbursed for the services?
Yeah, so certain events that go on in the city of Sonoma, we make them contract with us for additional services. The idea is if you're, whether a nonprofit, or some other, even for-profit group, that's gonna hold a major event somewhere that we believe may have an impact of our staff, we're gonna have to be pulled down to deal with issues that might be, arise in there, whether it's something as benign as parking or dogs or kids drinking. It really affects the rest of the community, right? We can't provide services in the east side of town, west side of town, if we're all stuck in the plaza dealing with someone who's trying to make money. And so the idea is to create some kind of equity where we can have a staff focus down there to deal with the problems without impacting the services that we deliver to the rest of the community. So we contract with probably, I would have to say, with the exception of farmers market, which is this little long contract, I mean, maybe 6, 8, or 10 of them. I wouldn't think that many would be. Is that all right? Yeah. And they're usually for just a couple $100, up to a couple thousand. Obviously, the big one would be the Summer Raceway, which is in the city contract, but that's like
So I just have 2 more questions. One of the concerns I have, because the department is so small, and maybe this is an opportunity when we look forward to the future and contracting, one, of course, is that there are so many meetings that go on here, Rotary, Chamber, Kiwanis, Seroptimus, all of them. And I've been to quite a few, and maybe I've just timed it wrong, but, and you can say I'm wrong, but you can't go 12 places at once. So, I know. So who might be able to do something like that in your department, and doing their regular job? Is that the community service officer?
So
I mean,
it depends on the
who's
type of meeting. I probably go to most of them, I guess. And so every year is funny time I have a speaking circuit, so January kicks on and I get the phone calls from Kiwanis and Rotary, and, which is great. I love meeting them. I love actually with the SIRS, or part of my most enjoyable discussion with them, or the Moose. And so I go to most of those. The sergeants attend, for instance, Coffee with the Cop program. It's usually done quarterly. That's deputies and the CSOs and the sergeants. Sometimes there's a topic specific, like crime prevention, at maybe one of our senior locations, and we'll probably send a community service officer out there to handle that.
I just, because Sonoma is so small, I don't know, it would be so nice for possibly a police, even if he's driving around, just dropping into a meeting, hello, how is everybody, and then leave. You don't even have to speak. Just that presence to let people know that they're part of our community. The other question, and you can say I'm wrong, you know, say, no, we do that. But as I said, you can't be everywhere. So the thing that concerns me is we have a lot of taxis and all of those things here. Having been a former taxi committee person, we used to actually do background checks on drivers as well as the safety of a car. And this was really a nice revenue source for another city. So I just wanted to know, do we do anything like that?
So, let me go back and answer your first question about just dropping into meetings. I think it's hard to know where all the meetings are, but I think anytime there's an event in the plaza, which is the central hub of all activity, we should have staff who swings by there, whether they're assigned there specifically under a contract or just coming in to see what's going on. So we do try to make it, that's kind of our biggest deal, or stompers games or so on and so forth. In terms of taxi cabs, no, we have an ordinance that basically requires them to get a business license and provide certain data to the finance department. But we don't do any additional background checks or any additional, vehicle inspections, for instance. And of course, ride sharing such as Uber and stuff is almost off limits in terms of just the way the statutes are written.
I personally am disappointed in it because we have so many visitors. And we have cab companies, and I don't even know who these people are. So, I just wanted to make that
It's interesting
comment.
because it's a little bit of a kind of a philosophical shift, right? Not in terms of just the cabs, but the cabs are feeling that they're being pinched because they're having to get all these, permits, and Uber and Lyft aren't necessarily or anybody else. And so it's interesting to see how all communities, not just Sonoma, many communities are kind of struggling with how to put that
Well,
together.
Uber and Lyft are also subject to some of those things, and I think cities are finally finding out that, it's more difficult.
Yeah, so council
It's
wants to.
difficult for
yeah,
them to
if
just
coun-
ride around.
If council wants to explore this at some point, this is, it's a bigger policy issue and something we can look at. Thank you, Brett. I'm gonna kind of keep us moving along because we've got a bunch of other, thank you. Any other, so thank you for the sheriff's, budget finance team.
18.
Thanks for coming out. Brett, thanks for, all right, so fire, Chief And just council, so if you want, there are, we will be taking about a 10-minute break at some point. We've got some dinner coming in, but there is some carrots and apples, or carrots and stuff, and some veggies if folks need a little something. So, Chief Baker.
Thank you. Madam Mayor, Council, my pleasure to be here, absolutely, for presenting my first budget. I'm still very excited to be in this new position and look forward to many more of these in the future. So, as you know, the Sonoma Valley Fire and Rescue Authority provides fire, rescue, EMS, prevention, and investigation services to the city of Sonoma and the Valley of the Moon Fire District presently. We're able to do that in a very unique service delivery model. We have dual role employees that are both firefighters and paramedics or EMTs, which allow us to provide both fire and rescue services as well as emergency medical services and transport emergency medical services. So with those dual role personnel, we're able to gain cost efficiencies that other models don't have. The other thing we rely on very heavily is we rely on volunteers still as a part of our service delivery, and they provide the third person staffing on our engine companies and as relief for our career folks when their times are appropriate. With this, I think we're able to provide a great service to all of the communities that we protect, including the city. As the narrative describes, we view this as a partnership. This isn't a contract for services necessarily. In technical terms it is, but in our vision, in our philosophy, in day-to-day operations, there's no difference between what the services we provide to the city or district. It's our area, and we're very proud to provide this service. with this, our contract for service, we're a very successful model. We're a model that's being looked at elsewhere in the county right now. There's a big push for evaluating fire services and how fire services evolve within Sonoma County, and our agency is looked at as a model for others to emulate in terms of being able to bring communities together, districts together, and to be able to provide quality services in a very cost-effective manner. Our arrangement with Valley of the Moon and the City of Sonoma started in 2001. We formalized a contract for services in 2011, and that contract was subsequently renewed as one of our major accomplishments this last fiscal year with another 5-year term. As an offshoot or a springboard from that, one of our highlights that again is in the narrative and is one of our not only accomplishments but goals for next year is we've entered into an additional contract for services with the Glen Ellen Fire District. The Glen Ellen Fire District was facing some very big challenges in terms of being an all-volunteer response agency and being able to provide adequate services to their communities through that model. We worked with them, my predecessor, Mark Freeman, and the boards worked very diligently over the last year to come up with another contract for services model that will be implemented in next month in July. It's a huge step for us as an organization, and it provides a lot of benefits to everyone, not only the Glen Ellen community, but to our agency as a whole, as well as the city. This will provide a 4th staffed engine company for our system. Right now, there are times when, because of the frequency of calls, our call volume went up 15% last year. We have multiple calls, we have subsequent calls, and we end up upstaffing ambulances and having our resources committed on emergencies. This will give us another staffed resource 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days of the year. So that's the benefit to us. The benefit to the Glen Ellen community is, again, they have constant responders. They're not relying on the availability of solely on the availability of volunteers to provide their service. They will also receive paramedic service through that. So that's a huge step for our organization. Some of the other things that I want to highlight for you as accomplishments, and again, this is a mix of accomplishments. Most of these, if not all of these, were started under Chief Freeman's leadership in collaboration with the city. But last fall, our department earned the highest classification from the Insurance Service Office of a Class 1 fire department. This is a rating that's attained only by 2% of fire departments within California and only 0.3% of fire departments nationwide. And it's a huge accomplishment, and it's something that the fire agencies that earn this rating are very proud of, and it means that we're doing a good job and we're providing exceptional service to our community. It looks at things like water supply system, our communication system, and our performance. And I think that, personally, I'd like to say we've, in the short time that I've been here, I've seen, because of recent incident activities, I've been able to see firsthand that Class 1 rating is well deserved. Our people do a fantastic job of providing service to the community. A couple other highlights for accomplishment as we continue. As you know, EMS revenue is a big portion of revenue for the city, and we continue to be very active in not only billing and utilizing best practices for our billing department, but also seeking out grant and reimbursement opportunities on the EMS side. We continue to be active in the community. We're involved in the hands-only CPR that we do at the fire station. We also are involved with the Save Lives Sonoma, getting the hands-only CPR instruction out to the schools. And as Chief Sackett said, we're a contributor with the every 15 minutes program as well. We also have a very active volunteer firefighter association that, while not technically part of our budget, they're a very important part of our organization and provide some, as you know, some very important services to our community. The biggest of which is the upcoming 4th of July celebration. So that's a huge endeavor. Lots of hands, lots of people involved in that, and we're looking forward to a very successful event. Transitioning to goals for the next year, our first and foremost goal is to see a successful implementation of the Glen Ellen contract and kind of the expansion of our department and the services that we provide. We will continue regional collaboration. We're active in accounting processes to evaluate fire and emergency services. With that, we have increased our collaboration within all the departments within the Sonoma Valley. We all face similar challenges and share kind of a sense of community, but also a geographical area that we rely on each other, and that system works very well. A couple other goals for the year: we're continuing our vehicle replacement program within both the city and the district, and we have a number of grant opportunities out there that we're hoping to receive some positive news on in the near future. With that, I will move into the budget, the recommended budget for 17-18. Again, there's some different numbers out there. The cost of the contract itself has gone up a relatively modest 3%, $166,000. That's due in part to two major considerations. One is the second year of a negotiated labor agreement that does provide a modest cost of living increase to the employees. That is balanced, however, by our department's local efforts for pension reform. With the second year of our contract now, our employees will be picking up to 12% contribution towards their retirements. So they'll be taking up to a 3% cost shift from the district to the employee. And that was part of this labor agreement. The second big factor with why the contract cost has gone up this year is we've seen a large increase in our workers' compensation costs. We are a little bit of a, relatively speaking, for a public safety agency, we're a little bit of an aging workforce. We've seen some additional injuries, and it's a component of both your injury history as well as your pay.
Which I could be wrong about this, that Sonoma had its own fire department, and then we created a separate contract fire department, and we gave them all of the equipment that the people of Sonoma had bought and donated that stuff to didn't the people of Sonoma pay for our fire department and then decide to make it separate? No, that's wrong.
So the way that the contract works, and it will work the same for Glen Ellen, is the Glen Ellen employees will become Valley of the Moon employees.
I mean, at the start of when we formed the Valley of the Moon.
The city still owns the fire station and the apparatus.
So there isn't, so there really, there's Valley of the Moon, the city, we created this authority where we come together and partner our services. We own Fire Station 1, they own the rest of their stations. We own the original fire engines and cars and everything, and we continue to be responsible for putting money aside for those assets.
Yes.
So there was this kind of like freeze frame, this is what you're in charge of, and this is what Valley of the Moon is in charge of, and then we are maintaining those assets and that infrastructure as a way to keep some clarity about what really was city scope of costs and what really was district scope of costs.
Okay.
And that kind of barrier still exists.
And that same construct is taking place with the Glen Ellen contract. So Glen Ellen will still own their fire station and be responsible for upkeep, maintenance, and they will still own their fire equipment. We will utilize their equipment in their station, but they will still maintain ownership.
But our resources that are the resources of the city of Sonoma, are they gonna be used to service the contract that you entered into with Glen Ellen?
No.
And if I think, let's leave this aside for right now. I think just in terms of, if you have separate questions on this one might be one to follow up kind of outside, just
I have a general question, also applies to police, and for everyone at the table. Is it common for a city to completely fund fire and police out of the general fund? Or are there other funding strategies?
Yeah, I mean, the fire will have their EMS revenues, police will have traffic citations, but the reality is, you know, police and fire are a core service. Public safety is one of the main things local governments provide, and that is what the majority of your general fund goes to. So, yeah, there's not so we, in the past, we've created charts to really show what is the general fund subsidy or investment. The general fund investment in like planning and building will be far less because they're doing cost recovery on their fees. With police and fire, you're limited legally, and so it is a general fund investment.
That is the one thing, though, that with us providing EMS transport and having those dual role employees, we are able to bring down the cost to the general fund that a lot of fire departments aren't able to do.
Yeah, that's great.
So,
And I think one of the other pieces is when the contract was negotiated, all of the EMS revenue comes to the city. Gary, do you have a
No,
question?
Steve brought up what that Glen Ellen is bringing that equipment in and so on, so they're contributing something to us as well, and I think it's gonna improve the service up and down the highway as well.
I had a question on the supplies. It went from 20,000 to 54,000 to 0. Why is that?
long-term building? Oh, was that an additional for EMS supplies out of the IGT?
We're talking
That was
about
on
15,
that was
16
on
to
the
16,
budget, that was
17.
IGT
This
funds.
is, yeah, so
The
this
variance in-
this was a mid-year budget adjustment that we brought when we did some one-time purchasing of electronic cots. And so I can pull the mid-year, but there were some one-time increases and that you all approved in February that then did the adjustments. So and those were one time and now go away.
So we're not cutting anything that's necessary.
No, and part of that is, that funding comes from reimbursements for EMS that we actively pursue, that, part of the conditions are that those funds are reinvested into the EMS system. So we use them for one-time funds when we have needs.
So I only have one quick comment, and that is, I like the idea of merging departments, because I think it provides an opportunity for people to get promoted within their systems. And that really, I think, is an advantage.
Thank you.
One more quick question. So when we send a truck off to a wildfire somewhere, what kind of reimbursement do we get?
Great question.
Excellent question. So when we're out on, and we are very, very active in statewide mutual aid. So we get full reimbursement of all of our personnel costs. So at the start of each year, we update those costs based on the additional labor agreements that have come into play. So when the crew's out, we get compensated for theirs as well as backfill costs. So
So
as
if you
far
have
as,
to do overtime? or-
yeah, so as far as personnel, we don't, we're not out anything, we're fully reimbursed. We also get a reimbursement for any of the vehicles that we take, whether it's the engines or whether it's the command vehicles that get sent out, we get a reimbursement for them. Any damage that happens to vehicles, equipment while they're out, replaced. And then in addition, we do get, we build in an administrative fee for those responses to cover all of the behind the scenes work and support that we provide to be able to send out the engines and the crews. So, so in a little bit, we actually receive a net positive to our budget when we're active, when participating, but it does go to some of the additional costs.
I just want to thank you. My son and I came and did CPR training the other day with the crew. It was awesome.
Thank you for coming.
And on that note, is there any way to bring those, do they still call them Recessa Annie? Or they have a new name
The
now?
rescue mannequins?
Yes. Is there a way to bring some to the plaza on Tuesday markets if you have volunteers, that people can just, I don't think you get certified doing that, but at least it gives more people the opportunity to learn about that.
Dangerous amateurs.
We try, we have as a goal, every Tuesday night, we try to get an ambulance staff
Oh,
to be able
great.
to come down to the Tuesday night market. And primarily what they're doing is they're to advertise for our ambulance membership program, that the revenue comes back to the city for. But any other PR and public information that they can help with, I can certainly check into the possibility of how much time they may or may not have available to do hands only. I know that based on the attendance at our last training session,
Right.
that we will be having additional training sessions,
that's
and we'll
good.
make sure to get
Because
that
it's no
word
more
out.
mouth, I
No.
think, isn't that right?
No, it's much more simplified, much more sanitary for most people's comfort, but very successful nonetheless. Okay, thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you.
So I think what we'll do is, why don't we take about a 5-minute pause, if we can?
I have a question, a good question. I always thought public comment was beginning, so that's my fault, I did one of these things, but at the current rate, it seems like that may not occur until in the second half of the Warriors game.
We'll have to wait.
So,
Well, I'm just curious, like, do you have like an estimated time to come back, or can we potentially shift things around here, because
so pleasure of the council, if you would like to do public comment now, we could do it now.
or maybe after your break, or
I
when,
figure, I mean, I assume there's two of you. Public comment, no, one. I don't have a problem with doing it now,
Yeah.
since you're not committed to the full cost.
So,
It's my fault, by the way, I had no idea, so I apologize.
well, and part of just for community, part of the reason, in terms of structuring and put it at the end is, there's all this information in the background, and so part of it is really to understand some of the picture, but there are other priorities as well, and so,
That makes sense.
yeah.
And I wouldn't want to lose my opportunity to speak up right here, everything from.
We can do public comment at the end, and we can, if you want to do a brief public comment down there.
You can do that, you
that's
just can't
fine.
speak twice.
So I can go now?
Go ahead, Councilor.
Okay.
Yeah.
No, I just wanted to come and briefly talk about two different funding priorities. Hopefully, the council can find room in its budget for next year. I want to briefly say first how impressed I am with this entire operation tonight, led by Kathy and the entire team. I think obviously today, and the budget process is obviously very important, and everything the city wants to do happens today, so I'm just very impressed with everything. And as I said earlier, I've never been to one of these things, so. The two things I wanted to discuss briefly, and you've yet to really get to them, although you addressed one briefly, were the historic training district and the cemetery situation. In terms of the historic training district, I'm on the design review and historic preservation commission. As I believe the report says, this is one of our major priorities. It's one of our priorities because we recently became a city certified local government a few years ago, and one of the things that CLG allows us to do is designate local historic districts. And so this would be our first one, and the entire neighborhood came out a few months ago to support it. Everyone's really excited about it. If you know anything about the rivalry between the League of Historic Preservation and the Snow Valley Historic Society, to see them come together and be so excited about this, it really says something. And I see that we're going to apply, or the idea is we would apply for a grant this year and then have a matching grant next year, $7,500. And so, and again, we're only talking about $15,000, and I know that's a lot of taxpayer funds, but in the grand scheme of things, to me, and maybe I'm wrong, $15,000 doesn't seem like a tremendous amount of money. And so I would hope the council could find it in its goals, and I think it would match your community character and your goal to potentially find funding for that for this year. I think $15,000 would be fine, but if you can't do that and you only want to do $7,500, perhaps do the $7,500 this year and then allow the community to look for other grants that might be available in this fiscal year, or potentially the community will just raise the rest of the money. So that's an idea. The more important idea, and so again, I appreciate your consideration of that. The more important idea that I have and thought I have is about cemeteries. I reached out to Council Member Cook and Council Member Agramani earlier in the year, and we had a meeting about cemeteries. And I know that on two of the your elements here tonight, in the finance and the public works, finance says initiate development of a plan for resolution of deficit and cemetery fund. Public works, develop a strategic plan for the cemetery's financial future. And I think that's extremely important. I think cemeteries are a very important department in Sonoma. It provides a very important service for Sonomans. And sort of like water or roads, I mean, we have a cemetery department, and it's sort of like we've just turned off the water or stopped paving the roads, and we've just sort of stopped that. And I want to briefly address a report, and again, I really appreciate the time here. You know, when we talk about we need to come up with a plan and we need to figure out how to fix this, well, the plan was developed in 2005, and we have this plan for a variety of reasons. It never really was executed. And so what I would suggest is taking this report and just reaching out to RJN Design Group and just have them update it for 2017, because it's a great plan. And this plan back in 2005 again said, given the virtual exhaustion of available products in city cemeteries, well, it's 2017, it's 12 years later. And I think not only would this help community character in the sense that there are a lot of people in town that literally have nowhere to go, you know, if the worst happens, and they want to remain here. But in terms of just the fiscal future, this plan back in 2005 said by 2011, if this had been executed, this deficit would be gone and your net revenue would be $300,000 a year. And so it's unfortunate we didn't do this, because we wouldn't have a deficit and you would be finding, you know, you would have potentially, according to this, $300,000 a year. So I think it'd be great if we could find the funding just to update this. And again, I don't know these people, but I assume it wouldn't be as much as starting the whole project. It would just be sort of updating the 2017 numbers. And then hopefully by next year, we'll have a plan on what to do, because unfortunately, you know, people are dying. And I think this is sort of the city's responsibility to try to find a place for them. We have a whole piece of property next to the Veterans Cemetery that was defined in this report as an opportunity for expansion, an opportunity for revenue. The baby boomers are starting to turn over 7 years old. And I just don't understand why we can't find the funding in it. And just briefly, I think all the historic district in this would probably be about $33,000. Which would be the cost for that special election in November. From what I understand, the primary is going to be moved up to March. I assume if it's on an existing election, it wouldn't cost as much money. So then I'll forget about that. But I'm looking for ways to pay for it. That was my only suggestion. Thank you again for obliging and giving me the opportunity. Thank you.
Thanks for coming, Kelso. That was Kelso Barnett for members of the audience who are not watching, sorry. So let's take a brief, we're gonna do a working dinner. So if we can turn the camera off, we'll eat more. Thanks, everyone. And thanks for Rebecca for getting food. I just wanna do a kind of a time check to departments, just as you're talking. I know the world of police and fire always are interesting, but please kind of try to keep a little tight as we move forward. Okay, so.
Well, thank God, issues in the planning world are very simple at this time. So, just to give you the quick thumbnail sketch, the planning department consists of myself, the planning director, a senior planner, an associate planner, an administrative assistant, and a part-time receptionist shared with the building department. We staff the city council and the planning commission. We also provide, we also staff the design review and historic preservation commission. And we provide staff supports to a number of other city commissions and committees. Our responsibilities include current planning. That's primarily the processing of development applications that are subject to different types of discretionary reviews, such as a use permit or a variance. We also are responsible for long-term planning, which includes projects like the circulation element update or the current review of the function impact fee. The planning department manages affordable housing agreements. The city has about 120 units that are subject to different affordable housing agreements that were brought about as a result of our inclusionary ordinance. We maintain the geographic information system, which is essentially an electronic mapping system, and we're responsible for bike plan implementation. In terms of the past year, we did complete the circulation element update. We completed design guidelines for the downtown district. The department has been working on an affordable housing impact fee study that has been under review by the city council, and which we will be completing this year. We've also been working on a draft downtown parking study that has been prepared and is undergoing internal review now, with public review and discussion scheduled for the following fiscal year. We have begun negotiations with state parks to reestablish a long-term lease of the Casa Grande parking lot. Working with the Climate Protection Authority, local greenhouse gas reduction measures for Sonoma were developed and have been adopted by the City Council. A management intern has been hired on a part-time basis from Sonoma State University to assist in implementing those measures. And we are working to expand commission training opportunities. Over the past 2 years, that effort is focused on the Design Review and Historic Preservation Commission, but as we'll discuss in just a moment, in next year's budget, we hope to bring more opportunities and more focus to the Planning Commission. And I would just add that in this last year, we're seeing an increasing number of development applications, especially larger, more complex development applications, and obviously that results in that's where a lot of our staff time is spent. So moving forward, in terms of the goals for the upcoming year, as the city manager mentioned, we would like to initiate a comprehensive general plan update. And the tasks that are called for in this coming year include a community visioning process, a community survey, and an economic development, the creation of an economic development strategy. And there's a $155,000 allocation that's proposed for that work. This is essentially a down payment on a comprehensive general plan update. This funding actually doesn't show up in the department category because it's coming out of, or proposed to be drawn as a transfer from the general fund reserves. As mentioned, we'd like to complete the housing impact fee study. That involves a $25,000 carryover from the previous budget. We would like to do some research to identify contract options for managing those affordable housing agreements, because that's a very specialized function. We're not proposing any funding set aside for that. We would be just looking at options in this year and seeing what's out there. We'd like to expand commission training, as I mentioned. This is a $3,000 increase, which is not necessarily a lot of money, but it will greatly expand different opportunities, especially in terms of planning commission training. The railroad district has been mentioned under public comments. Again, the staff recommendation is to pursue that, but to take advantage of that grant funding opportunity, so we don't actually have money allocated this fiscal year, but we would seek that grant funding, which I think that we have a very good chance of getting, and complete the project in the next fiscal year. And it's not pointed out in these bullet points, but since it shows up in the dollars, I thought I'd better mention it. We would like to extend the iCompass program to the Planning Commission. And so that's a cost allocation of about $12,000 if it's supported by the City Council. Certainly we want to do what we can to support the Planning Commission. And the iCompass program, I think that the Council's already seen a lot of benefit from that, and we feel that the Planning Commission would greatly benefit from it as well. So that's my summary. Thank you.
Just a quick question on the summary page at the beginning. It shows that the planning budget is going to be reduced by $27,897,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't see that on. I'm looking at page 54. Oh, maybe I'm in the wrong. Sorry, I'm in the wrong one. What is the reduction from $27,000? There it is.
Oh, well, it's really about the fact that we are doing fewer outside consulting contracts through the general fund. If you look at what we're doing with the general plan update, you know, overall for your entire general fund, it's an increase. But in terms of general fund revenue, it's a decrease.
I see.
Is this training budget, I mean, I just know that this is, we've been talking about this year, and particularly in light of, you know, drastic change in the commission, it seems like that's an area where we should be investing this year, and is that gonna be, I mean, I would certainly support having more invested into that, particularly at this juncture, and in light of the huge projects that are coming down the road. So I don't know if there's any room to squeeze more of that, and then going back to the train district. 'Cause I think you have that on your list as sort of putting it off, but I would, if not finding room for the whole thing, the idea of funding half and then letting the community raise that other half, which I think if it would, that's what I would prefer.
Maybe I'll just talk about the train district briefly, maybe you can articulate what the commission training that we're talking about. In terms of the train district, part of my thought on this, as David and I talked it through, is really also just workload of staff. So as we look at the 3 major development projects that we have in front of us, we have trying to start some of the general plan. I'm worried about staff capacity. I and I would rather be kind of manage expectations that we're not gonna kind of be able to get to that, I think, based on it's kind of just some other things that are rising to the top. It's not that we don't think it would be good to do, but it's part of a staff resource issue. So, I mean, if council wants to put 7,500 in, we still go trying to get the grant for the rest of it, but I don't see the work happening. Maybe starting at the end of this fiscal year, but just with everything else that's on the plate, that's my concern.
But would it make any difference, sort of in light of a general plan update, whether having this pop up either at the middle or the end, or having it on the radar at the beginning or the middle? I don't know if it would even make a difference with any of that.
I don't believe it would make any significant difference in terms of the general plan update process, no. And if I may, with regard to commission training, there's really a couple of different major training opportunities for the planning commission, one of which is somewhat fortuitous. It doesn't always happen, but this year the California APA conference is going to be held in Sacramento. That's in late September. So that is an opportunity that we've identified for the planning commission. We have the annual Sonoma State Planning Commission conference in December, and then in the spring there's a league training opportunity for planning commission. So I feel that those are the 3 major opportunities for the planning commission that are not in-house. And we are also working on some in-house training that would be provided to all commissions in terms of things like just running a meeting, or you know, avoiding issues of bias, things like that. And you know, I guess in my mind, I'm thinking that that's going to be a pretty full plate of training, and that this money is going to be sufficient to support that.
Well, is all that in-house training, is that need to be budgeted anywhere, is it just eaten because it's our some staff time?
That'd be staff time and come out of the city attorney's budget.
Dave, you just took everything away from me. Look what I have written down here about the just simply running a meeting. And I've had with some projects here, I'm sure other people have had that experience. So tell me what you think about this project. And it's like, well, I really don't have that information. And I don't know. I don't know what I think at this point. It's like we need to give them a mantra, people to just say, you know what, it's inappropriate for me to discuss that part of that. So I think that would be really great, and I know that Vice Mayor Edwards said he's attended those planning meetings at San Francisco, Sonoma State. He thought they were excellent. I actually think I'd like to go sometime. And but I think those are great ideas, and they're really going to get us on the right track. Because you know what, people that serve on the commissions are wonderful and extraordinary people, but they're just ordinary people, and they don't know how to face those eyes when they say, I can't understand why you can't say something about this project. So I think those things will really be great for them.
Great, thank you. Other questions? All right, Dave, thank you very much. We're gonna move to building. Wayne Wyrick. And so talking about building development services.
Well, thank you for the opportunity to talk today. Just want to briefly give a description about our department. The building department basically does permitting, plan review, inspection services for all the construction work that happens within the city. We have a building inspector, a planned examiner, myself, and a part-time administrative assistant that helps us accomplish that. With the rolling list of regulations that continue to occur, it's always a challenge for us to keep our levels of service where they are, which are really pretty good compared to other building departments. But it's a constant balancing act. So we're constantly shifting duties with our inspector, our planned examiner, and myself, and trying to balance that out to provide the best level of service to the community. In terms of accomplishments, I just want to point out that we did get the new codes adopted this last year, and part of that process is updating some 65 forms and informational handouts to really educate the public, provide tools for people that are applying for permits, and getting the information updated to those new codes so that the people that we serve have that information. And it's a huge effort nowadays to try to do that because of all the various code changes. In terms of goals for next year, we want to continue our customer service levels. One of the things that we do need to do under state law is to adopt an ordinance for permit streamlining for electric vehicle charging stations. That will be coming before the council, I hope, by the end of July. And we'll have that ordinance before you so you can take a look at it. We're also wanting to get a building inspector ICC certified in electrical, and also have him certified as a certified access specialist, so that, again, we're improving our credentials. In terms of the budget, it's really a status quo budget. The major increase in cost really is related to the realignment of the unfunded liability costs and regular merit increases and that type of thing. So, be happy to answer any questions.
On page 53, fiscal year 2017-2018 goals, I really like the idea of the processing for permitting process for electrical vehicle charging stations as required by state law. And I think new buildings, they just have that available, but obviously actually setting it up. They have the cable or something available to charge as you build a home, and then whoever the contractor is completes the job.
In new homes with attached garages, there's a requirement to provide conduit for future electric vehicle charging.
Sorry.
This will actually provide a process for an expedited permitting process. So if everybody meets the criteria, they'll be able to get a permit quickly and efficiently, and they'll meet the requirements. And so that's the purpose of this streamlining process.
Yeah, I think it's really a good idea.
Yeah.
Obviously, having just recently been somewhere, I know there were charging stations at this hotel, but they all said Tesla. So I'm wondering if other people can use it. I mean, money is money. Who cares, right?
Well, the whole electric vehicle charging station industry is changing rapidly, and there are different types of charging systems, and we're seeing some new innovative power systems for homes that we've never seen before, and so it's quickly evolving.
It's a great idea.
All right. Thank you, Wayne. Appreciate it. You'll see Wayne again. We talk about internal service funds because he maintains that part of our operation for us. On Public Works, I'd like to have Dan come up. And I also want to introduce Colleen Ferguson. Colleen is our new Public Works Director. You see her picture in the paper. Doesn't even start till next Wednesday, but very committed. Here, welcome.
I'm so grateful to Kathy and Dan for giving me the opportunity to learn so much about the city with this conversation this afternoon. I woke up in Ashland this morning, had a nice bed and breakfast, and I'm concluding my vacation on my way home.
Dedicated. So thrilled to have Colleen here. And I also want to introduce Kat Wall, who I'm blocking, but Kat is our Public Works Administrative Manager, Project Manager, and really is kind of does a lot of work on the budgets, and it's been a huge help. So thank you, Kat. So welcome, Dan.
Thanks.
So it's going to be a Dan show here for a little bit as we walk through another really big part of our operation.
Colleen was so dedicated, I thought I would turn it over to her. So looking at the Public Works budget, on page 57, you see we have a number of different fund categories, and I'll try and work through these fairly quickly. But just looking at the org chart, one of the things I wanted to point out here were the three major divisions we have of water operations, street maintenance, and parks. These are really cross-functional, and that's a force multiplier for us. Because, for example, when we have a major streets project, it's all hands on deck, or a major water leak, it's everybody runs to that problem. Or even in the parks, if we're cleaning out the duck pond, it takes just about everybody. So we have a real cross-functional staff here, and that also helps to create some well-rounded people who can perform a multitude of different projects. So looking over in the first category of Public Works Admin and Parks, and this combines a few things in here, including stormwater compliance. One thing I would like to say is that I might talk a lot about projects in this overview, but most of the resources in the Public Works budget are really dedicated to our day-to-day operations. The projects get the glamour, but probably 60 to 70% of our work is in the trenches. Just highlighting maybe a few accomplishments. Like I mentioned here, we worked with some community groups to get their approvals for the Vallejo Monument, which everybody knows is under construction right now. And we also got the approvals for the Sister City Penglai Ting Pavilion. Although the groups are providing most of the work and funding, there's a lot of effort in the background getting the contracts agreements worked out. We also completed a maintenance rehab of the plaza restrooms with the LED lighting and waterless urinals and new paint. And per council goal, installed a bottle filling station in the plaza. We implemented the battery-powered backpack leaf blowers in our parks. We also completed a 10-year vehicle speed survey that we're required to do. We did that in-house, which probably saved the city at least about $60,000 or $70,000 in cost. And so that was a great accomplishment. We got a grant for $72,000 to perform an intersection safety analysis, which is underway right now. We'll bring in that report to council pretty soon. We obtained a CBDG grant for an update to our city's ADA transition plan, which is now about 12 years old. And we also attained the OBAG 2 federal aid grant for $500,000 for the Fire Creek Bridge. So looking forward, what we're looking amongst the many goals, just to highlight a couple, upgrading the trash and recycling containers. Some may say, well, you just go out and buy them. It's not quite that simple with all the things that we have to consider. The historic appearance, the maintenance requirements, the accessibility, the equipment that the garbage hauler uses, and so forth. So it actually turns out that the Waste Management Authority has hired a summer intern to help us with that effort. And we do want to implement that intersection safety analysis report to get that and see what the safety problems are at over 20 intersections around the city. not just vehicles, but pedestrians and bikes as well. So looking at this first category over on page 63, we're looking at very minimal changes in the budget for this public works, admin, parks, stormwater category. Actually, there's been a decrease in a lot of the expenditure categories of $79,000, but of course we have the unfunded liability, some personnel cost allocation, and also we have the systemic safety intersection grant of $72,000, which is in here. So that, all that put together results in an increased expenditure of about $63,000.
So, and this is where the receptacles are here. In addition, there's $5,000 to look at bike parking, to install some additional bike parking in the plaza, which the CSCC has brought up.
And looking into more of a streets category, on the next page, we're looking at several different accounts, as the city manager noted. These have been reshuffled and rearranged. Some serve different uses. So we have 5 different fund categories here. But basically, any employee costs and general day-to-day maintenance expenditures are going into a general fund account for street maintenance. And there's a old streets capital general fund account, 301 550000, which really won't be used except as a transfer account. And then the gas tax, which used to fund employee costs and general maintenance and some projects, will now be moved to at least some of those expenditures for employee costs will be moved to streets maintenance, and other capital costs will be moved to another project category for capital projects administration. And Measure M goes back to a countywide sales tax measure, $0.25. We get modest $80,000 from that. You may say, well, a $0.25 sales tax would amount to a lot more than that. True. But most of that funding went to other larger projects along the 101 corridor. It also went to bike paths. Oh, by the way, Sonoma-Shelville Trail, that's getting pretty close, and actually the first part of the Sonoma Valley Trail has been bid out. So, and those were Measure M initiatives as well. So there are a lot of things that are going on there, but in Measure M, one thing I'd like to point out is that we only get $80,000 a year, and to try and spend that every year gets kind of cumbersome. We usually try and accumulate maybe 2, 3, 4 years of Measure M before we end up using it. And we do intend to use it this coming fiscal year on our street rehab project, which is Avenue del Oro, reconstructing that street from 5th Street east to Cordilleras. Highlighting some accomplishments in this streets category. We've really been, although it doesn't show, we've been really busy on the Chase Street Bridge. Finishing design, getting through the environmental phase, which was a major accomplishment, and finally getting through the right-of-way phase with the 4 property owners. So that puts us in a position where we're ready to move forward to the construction phase. Probably not in this coming year, but in the following fiscal year. We completed a major street rehab project and the slurry seal project, and we got through most of phase 4 of our sidewalk trip hazard repair program, completing almost 750 trip hazard repairs. Some goals is to get the final approvals from Caltrans to begin the Chase Street Bridge replacement construction project. We want to get design completed for the bike ped bridge over Friar Creek. You may say, well, didn't you say the funding would be in like 1920? True, but once you get design done, it takes almost a year to get the environmental done after that. So we want to get the design done this next year. And we want to start on the sidewalk repair program, Phase 5, and do our pavement management system update. Speaking of which, this past year, we had been, after our last evaluation, we had been at a PCI of 75. And we did some pretty good projects this past year, which we entered into this model. But unfortunately, it looks like for this next round, what we call the MTC pothole report, our PCI is going to come down to a 73. So that's unfortunate, but we're still doing pretty well. Still barely second place in the county, but Roner Park is catching up fast. As on the next page, we just see the street maintenance fund category. Again, I mentioned this is new. We're shifting costs over from gas tax. So it's kind of hard to compare. But I also want to mention, it's not just street maintenance, it's drainage, also some traffic, sidewalk issues, and also some tree issues. Streets capital, this has generally been, all the funding has been moved out of this account. It's just used for transfers. And most of it is moved to the capital improvement fund. On the next page, we have the gas tax account, which we get the gas tax that we have been getting, or the highway user tax account, plus the new Senate Bill 1 funding, which we'll put in here. We'll use a lot of this to fund the 2017 slurry seal project, which is currently out to bid. And we'll also design the 2018 slurry seal project, and then the rest of it will be transferred into the capital improvements account. I talked about Measure M before, and we intend to expend that balance in this coming year. In the capital improvements fund account, this is the new account where we'll put our street rehab projects and Chase Street Bridge projects and other major improvements in there. And going on to a very small account is on page 77 is the Masonabi Property Fund account. This was just a very small special account set up for the maintenance and operations of the Masonabi property. Minor maintenance, no changes, not much to talk about there, no staffing. Going on to the cemetery account, 501. I just want to note a fair amount of work had to take place. Trees not only fell at the Valley Cemetery, which all of us saw, major water leak, local residential flooding, but also several trees fell up in the mountain cemetery as well. And we are looking to do a strategic plan for the cemetery's financial future. Although I will have to say, we have reviewed that report, and there are no real magic bullets there. It's going to be really tough to find a financial strategy going forward. So really, as you look at the cemetery budget numbers, there's very little change going on there. And finally, I want to look at the water utility. We run a very robust water utility with a lot of operations going on. As I've said in the past, we have 6 water tanks, booster pump stations, 8 wells, so we're very busy in this area. We've taken on a lot of big projects, including completing the well 8 a year and a half ago. But looking forward, one of the problems we've had is with just the dramatic drought in conservation that we've seen a drop in revenues, as one would expect when you have a 26% level of conservation over the past couple of years. But in looking at that, one of the ways forward is to do a new water rate study to see what the water rates should be in light of this conservation, and maybe even develop some conservation rates, should those need to go into place, should another drought come around. Also looking at a cost allocation study. I mean, as the city manager noted, there is some terminology in terms of some transfers, but obviously the general fund is providing some services to the water utility, and we need to understand better how those services should be accounted for and how they should be reimbursed by the water fund. So some accomplishments. One problem we had was that our master meter had been located out on the Verano Bridge, on the Verano Avenue. And we finally got the water agency to move our master meter out to the outlet of the Squaw water tanks, because we really didn't know what was happening between the Verano Bridge and our water tanks. So that is great. We can't quite say whether there's been a significant effect, but early indications are that there may be. The recycled water is finally in the city of Sonoma. I'm sure you've seen that. It was a mess for a while, true, but it's there. It's ready to serve the school district in our small Engler Park, and we're doing a feasibility study to see if it can be taken further. So looking forward, we're going to try and complete this $3 million West Napa Street water improvement project at night on the busiest street in the city, and I'm not going to say it's not going to come without complaints, but we're going for it. We're going to do a water master plan update, and as I mentioned, take on the water rate study and cost allocation plan. So amongst budget highlights, generally there's a reduction in transfers out and decrease in internal services, but overall we're seeing very small change from the last fiscal year in the water budget. So with that, I'd be glad to answer any questions. Okay.
This is a quick question. When is the time to talk about, I don't think it's tonight, when is the time to talk about whether or not the cemetery, we should do a study or whatever? What is the appropriate time to discuss that?
Well, what I've said to some council members in the past is with the changeover in the finance structure, I really need to have a permanent finance director on board. We need to review that plan. I really need to understand kind of and go back through kind of what's occurred in the past few years. I've skimmed the report, but want to really kind of absorb that prior report. So there's some just getting up to speed and having the right people in place to do some of that. So, I do think I think it's on our 3-year plan. I know that there's some real interest at least kind of starting to have some of that conversation this year. So I think that's part of our strategic plan, and this is to really talk about and put on, to look at our cemetery and understand some options. Whether it's a redo of, an update of the current study, I don't know. I don't know if these individuals, if there's a different firm or anything. But that's really kind of trying to figure out what is the roadmap forward. What do we need to do to kind of unpack this and figure out what our next steps are. So it is a piece of our kind of financial sustainability that we need to figure out. And I think it is as the member of the public said, I think there's two things. There's the financial side of the cemetery, but there's the service side of the cemetery, there are folks that want to be buried in this town, and we really have limited options. But if we're going to do anything else, one, do we even have space? What's that look like? What are different opportunities? So it is it's a place that we need to spend some time. But I don't think I don't see, just with a variety of other things we've got going on this year, that we're gonna solve this all this year and figure it, but I do think we should be sticking some stuff forward.
I just want to note that one of the things I hope, in fact, from the day I got here, I was trying to find a way to get around to it, but it was to create a cremains only policy to bring before council, because we have such limited space. That could be, I don't think it's the silver bullet, but it's certainly a step in the right direction.
Well, maybe we can have a hearing on it sometime this year and go.
Yeah, I think there's kind of an education piece so that we all understand the business, you know, and the service. But as staff, we kind of gotta get up to speed too. Any other questions for Dan?
Just one, I guess, with respect to this issue, obviously, we shouldn't have gone into the business in the first place. But that's happened long time ago. But just a suggestion as we're on this subject, just to broach an additional issue, is a gift acceptance policy that, you know, when people wanna give us something and the property has to be examined and you find out there's a hazardous waste, you know, we might think about not accepting certain things. That's what a lot of nonprofits do. I don't even know if the city does. I just think it's a good policy. Then it gives you a way to step out of a gift, even though they think it's wonderful. But
We
you
should
know,
always be careful about what we accept, yes, because sometimes you are accepting more liability and maybe you don't have the finances to take care of what someone might want to gift you. And that definitely happens in public agencies sometimes.
oh, okay.
And sometimes but sometimes there, you know, sometimes there may be some cost, but, you know, maybe a long-term parcel that you want to own for some reason, so they each have to be looked at individually. Yeah, thank you.
Oh, and I guess I wanted to mention, you discussed the Mazanavi house. Thank you so much. It was such a dangerous place for a while. And I think it's really important that people know that you move forward on that, which I really appreciate. And I know it took a lot of time to, you know, just remediate all of that. So I really appreciate it, because so many people saw that, especially all those hundreds of bocce ball players.
Right.
And they really thought it was a scary place. And you've made it, it's not a, you know, it's not a beautiful building right now, but it has the ability to be, but at least it's not dangerous any longer.
Right.
Thank you so much.
And we should make sure everybody knows we're talking about the Masonavi Cottage, not the house.
Yes.
right?
No, yes, the cottage, sorry, oh my God. Cut that, please. Yeah, thank
Just
you.
one other thing thank you, that I want council to understand too, when, coming in as kind of a new view of the organization, this city and this council has invested a lot in street maintenance. Obviously, when we lost redevelopment, there was a lot of redevelopment money was going to street maintenance. But historically, there's been between $1.5 million to $2 million put in street maintenance out of the general fund. That is fairly unheard of, that kind of general fund investment in street maintenance. So typically, cities do it out of bond measure, like you go, every 5 years, you go get a bond, and you pay for it, and you do it that way. So the fact that this community, which is not that large, and the budget's not that large, there's been that kind of commitment, says a lot. I do think going forward, you know, if we want to continue to maintain that kind of investment, that's one of, you know, there's a variety of things we want to do, whether it's improve our parks or improve the plaza, you know, a variety of things we want to look at. We're going to need to look, that was part of the reason of really looking at that increase of the TOT. So I just want to really commend the council and community. It is not a normal to be putting that kind of general fund in. It really speaks to the commitment that the communities have. So, next, I think is internal services. Or capital improvement. Sorry, I got behind here. Now we're going to miscellaneous. Okay, go to miscellaneous community activities. So I'll do this next one. So community activities is a budget where there is a variety of ways the city supports and encourages a sense of community that we have in Sonoma. So a few categories. There's funding here. We provide support to nonprofits in terms of actual facilities. So with the emergency shelter, we pay for the utilities, and there's $1 a year rent for that facility the city owns. Sebastiani Theater, the city negotiated a 50-year lease. We pay 50% of that lease. It's, I think, about a $50,000 lease. And the foundation pays the other 50%, and so the funds for that lease are in here. There's also some one-time funds to do some ADA study. So there's a number of Sebastiani Theater support for that program and that asset that we all value in the communities here. There's also some small funds in here, support for youth, contribution for the crossing guards and the grad night. The city's commitment to economic development, the contract with the Chamber of Commerce for the $125,000 for their business and economic vitality services that they provide to the city, because we don't have an economic development manager or a business manager doing those functions. And then there is the agreement with the Visitors Bureau, where the city supports $100,000 to the Visitors Bureau, since this was similar to what was done in the past with redevelopment funds. There's also support for arts and special events for the Culture and Fine Arts Commission, and then the special events manager contract is in here in terms of managing all the special events in the plaza and the city party, etc. There's some other financial direct support to nonprofits. So the lease of the Veterans Building, the $15,000 the city underwrites there, and the Community Fund Grant Program. So the Community Fund Grant Program is here in the community facilities. Right now, the council has a policy of doing 1.5% of general tax revenue, excluding any restricted. So that number last year was about 194,000, and it's about a 10,000. On page 94 shows a little chart and shows, so this next year it'll go from 194,000 to 204,000 if council stays with that current 1.5%. Again, we'll come back to council in July and August to kind of flush out the rest of the hybrid. And the communication I've had with the executive directors from the nonprofits is, we would have this kind of determined and figured out by September, and they're aware of this timing. So some accomplishments this year was really kind of doing a review of the community fund grant and kind of beginning that evolution. I think the community events manager that was created last year, Lisa Jansen's role, has been very helpful, I think, to really streamline and look at how we're managing the plaza. We've updated the lease for the Veterans Building, and we are looking at some programs, and I'm having conversations with other folks in town about how to really take some of our community events, break them a little bit into heritage events and community events, and increase some other support to some of those heritage events. So some goals for this next year are to really, we'll be coming back to review the community events policy, look for some ways that we may want to modify that and tweak after a year of work with Lisa, and we'll work with the CSEC on that as well. Hopefully have another great city party for our residents, and then also finish the community fund grant program. So the main changes here, again, I mentioned the ADA study for Sebastiani. The overall budget goes up about $30,000. I have put in about $15,000 in the budget to, in addition to the core contract with the community events manager, to have that person either assist with other special projects, orchestrate the city party. We could do some other, there's definitely some other fun things that could be done, even if we want to do some other things with the farmer's market. I can just see some ideas, and we've been brainstorming, so it's a little bit of money to see if we want to do some of that. And then the community fund grant program, the $10,000 increase there. Any questions on the council's commitment to community activities?
Well, I know that the coordinator, Lisa Jansen, is absolutely fantastic. I mean, she's almost an interpreter for everybody, because people come to her for saying different things, and some of us don't know, what did they just say, what do they want, and she gets it right away. So I really think she's an asset to us here. And she speaks everybody's language, depending, it doesn't matter who they are or what event they're bringing. She understands exactly when they say, that's those things. It could be recycling or something, but she's pretty amazing. I'm really pleased with her performance.
I think Lisa's done a really fabulous job, and there's some things she's continuing to work on, some of the environmental sustainability, recycling, and the trash, to really kind of make sure we get some of that ethic in our events. I think there's some ideas to potentially, maybe some fun things we could do over the holidays, some other things that we can explore a little more too.
I just want to talk really quick about the Sonoma Valley Visitors Bureau contract.
Mm-hmm.
How long has that contract been going? Do you know?
I don't have that one pulled. I want to say it was a 5-year contract, but I don't have that one with me, and I don't recall off the top. It is a multi-year contract, and we're about midway.
About midway.
I'm happy to send that information out.
Yeah, I'd like to get a little bit of information just on the contract.
Okay.
Where does the CSEC, what budget are they in? Do they have a budget?
There's not an individual budget for the CSEC, no. No, the only budget that a commission has is fine arts because they do the reception, that type of thing. Typically, my experience, you don't have individual budgets for individual commissions, but as commissions have ideas and come forward, and they're working on things the council has directed them to, or an idea comes forward working with staff, then we bring those things forward. Sometimes there's money within an operating budget to do something. Sometimes there needs to be a budget allocation, like the bike parking. This year is putting money in, based on the conversations they've been having.
What about staff time allocated? Is that in a particular department or?
It's all based on whoever supports the commission, so public works staff is probably just in public works maintenance. It's kind of scattered. Any questions on community activities? This next budget is non-departmental. So these are expenses that kind of affect the city as a whole. And so there's things here like part of the person the receptionist at the front counter, who serves kind of all the departments. The website maintenance, the utilities for our buildings, custodial services, some leases, our telephone system. So there's a variety of things here that don't neatly fit in anyone else's kind of bucket, for lack of a better term, so it's kind of this non-departmental. There are some places here though, going forward, I've been talking to Public Works a little bit, we may want to actually next year create a facilities program budget, so we can really look at what are we investing in our facilities, what are maintenance of our facilities costing us. But that's kind of a project for next year. The big changes in the non-departmental is this year there was $50,000 for a hazard mitigation plan. This is a plan that we need for kind of our emergency services. Rather than just budgeting it again, Chief Yeager and I have been having conversations wanting to really first fully understand, can we leverage the county some? Is there another way to do this, and are there any grant funding? So we may come back mid-year on this, but I really wanted to kind of see if there were some other opportunities first. And then the contract the council just approved with the Sonoma Valley Community Communications for the videotaping. Thank you. That contract is included in the budget. And then there was a small increase in custodial, and then again, I placed a plug figure in for the Casa Grande lease, assuming we're able to move forward with the state and get that. Any questions on non-departmental?
Are you saying you changed custodial services?
I put a little bit more money. I want to say, no, it's same cost, but I just I think I put maybe $5,000 to do a little more there. It's a small item.
Because, whatever. I mean,
And
I don't have to say anything to you, even the front door at City Hall.
We've been working over the last couple months to do some increased maintenance in City Hall and our facilities. Because so windows are going to be washed, I think, shortly. Carpets just got cleaned. They were in this weekend doing all the cobwebs, and so there's some basic TLC. Some occasionally we all have to do kind of that spring cleaning on our facilities and even public buildings. So that is underway.
And I'm so happy about Casa Grande parking lot. That is unbelievable, especially because I think it's open season on Sonoma, you know, with buses, and especially that last incident from Napa, the concert that they had. Just, you know, give it to Mikey, he'll eat everything. That's what they think we think here. So it would be nice for us to get tougher with them and to tougher with the tour buses. There are guests.
Yeah, there are guests, and we'll be continuing to do some work in that area.
Thank you.
All right, so next would be page 100. This would be transfers, and we'll turn this to Sue Casey.
So this just represents all the funds that the general fund transfers to other funds to pay for services. Debt service used to include the transfer for the unfunded liability, so it was lump summed here out. And so you can see there's a huge decrease in it's page 100. A huge decrease in the budget because of the unfunded liability is now allocated out to the separate departments. And then we used to transfer gas tax money into gas tax to balance the budget. That all came out of the general fund, and so that's now on the general fund, so we don't need to do that anymore.
Any questions on? So we'll now move to the capital improvement, and I'll ask Dan maybe how are we doing this? Wayne, you starting?
I'll just go into the public buildings real quick.
City buildings first?
Yeah. So the capital improvement program is just a way for us to identify the capital projects that are being performed in this next fiscal year, or what is planned. In terms of public buildings, there are 5 projects that have been identified, and they include the looking at the plaza restroom improvements, the second phase of that, just from a design standpoint, to evaluate what needs to happen, look at what the cost would be, and do a more thorough job. You know, Dan already mentioned that they did some painting and decorating really on the restrooms this year just to get us by, but I think there's further evaluation that needs to be done on the design side. Then there's over at the Carnegie Building, where the Visitor Center and the Finance Department reside, we want to do some selective repainting and recarpeting or reflooring. At City Hall, there's some water intrusion in the stone parapet, and so we're going to try to get that fixed. The fire station has a concrete equipment pad that they would like to put out in front of their mechanics garage so they can lift the fire trucks up and work on them from the underneath. And then finally, there's a leak, a water intrusion problem over at the regional library at the existing chimney that was caused, I think it happened during the earthquake, and we need to get that fixed. So those are the public buildings, and Dan can finish up with all the other projects.
Oh, can I ask
Sure.
about the library? Do they, who pays, I know that sounds stupid, but does county have anything to do with that?
We own and maintain the building,
Oh, okay.
the outside of the building.
Thank you.
Yeah,
What
so
is-
we have joint powers. There's an agreement, as part of the joint powers agreement with the broader library, JPA, each city owns and maintains the outside, the hard core of the building. And then the inside is maintained by the library, and I think the landscaping is maintained by the library as well. But we own the building, which is why our logo is on it as well, because it's a partnership between us and the library joint powers.
Yeah, it's a good deal.
What does LTPM stand for?
On to building maintenance. It'll be talked about in a little bit later in the budget. Okay, continuing on the capital improvement program under combined water and streets improvements, we have the 2017 street rehab. Whenever we rehab a street, we always look at doing fixing the water system underneath so that we don't disturb it twice, and that's what we're doing on this project. Turns out we just opened bids last week. We got a good bid from Argonaut Constructors at $543,000. And now there are other costs, contingency, geotechnical, and a few other costs, but we're within budget. We'll be bringing that to council in the first meeting in July for award. So that project is moving forward. The 2017 slurry seal, we're out to bid on that right now. Hopefully we'll get some good bids, and we're I think taking on about over 20 street segments throughout the city, including some pretty bad ones like Verano Avenue and West Main Street right in front of the plaza.
Plaza crosswalks too.
Oh yes, and as part of the project, although we won't be slurry sealing around the plaza, we'll be, since we already have a striping contractor as part of the contract, we'll be restriping all the crosswalks around the plaza. So that'll kind of tidy it up quite a bit. Then we typically do design in the spring of every year, so that next $22,000 is for design of the following year's slurry seal project. The Trace Street Bridge, as I mentioned, we finished design, environmental, and right-of-way acquisition, but we're in the stage where we have to apply to Caltrans for authority to construct. But we have a few minor construction management issues we have to deal with, and some tree mitigation, so that's what the $70,000 is in there for. The Fire Creek Bridge replacement, the grant that we received was for construction, so we have to finish design and environmental. We actually completed a lot of the design and environmental in that project several years ago before we lost redevelopment funding. And then the sidewalk repair program, we allocate $50,000 every year to do sidewalk saw cutting, and also cost shares with residents where we can't saw cut the degree of the trip hazard that they might have. Groundwater banking, we're still moving forward on that project. This is in partnership with the water agency. We're just getting to the point of permitting that. It's taken longer than we thought, but the plan is to put winter water in the aquifer this coming winter. And then the big project with West Napa Street water improvements. Most of that funding for that will be obligated in this coming fiscal year, and we hope to finish in about October. And then, as the city manager mentioned, trash receptacles in the plaza, $50,000.
Dan, could I ask about that, the Waste Management Agency? Do they, I thought they had something of it, or was it?
There are all kinds of programs that'll provide you with free or nearly free trash receptacles, but they're really not of the quality or style or anything that we would really need.
Yeah, thank you so much for saying, for telling me that. So with the Friar Creek, of course, you know, that started some time ago, years ago, and Lori Gallion, of course, was on the Transportation Authority that I am now. So I think there was a lot of dealing that went on behind the scenes in order for us to get this money. So we really have other cities and possibly the county to thank for the funds for the Friar Creek. And I first found out about it from people who lived in that neighborhood. In fact, we have someone here. It's just interesting. It's you know, it's unbelievable. You know, the way kids get to school in that area. Well, you know, jumping fences and going in creeks, because it's sort of dangerous what they're doing, and it's so nice to know that this is moving forward. So I really appreciate it, and I'm sure the people that live in that neighborhood really appreciate it as well.
One more quick one, David. So on the new crosswalks, striping, that's going to be the Continental design, or is that?
Well, because we already have the standard with the two straight lines, we're gonna have to turn it into a ladder style. Just because it would take too much energy, and it wouldn't look good if we ground up the two. And also with the ladder style, it makes it a little bit clearer of where a vehicle should stop than the Continental style does.
And then when Caltrans comes in 2019 or 2020, we'll go with
Continental style, we have made a strong request to do that, but we can't guarantee it.
Thank you.
Could you explain what this line is? What this list is?
All right, Dan, this is from the Community Development Agency. This has been on for some time. These are projects that were originally allocated through the redevelopment bond, based on a lawsuit or
So they're just hanging out here until something happens.
I almost took it off, but
Okay.
thank you. All right, so Wayne will come back. You know, in a small agency, we all wear different hats, and one of the hats Wayne wears really well is he really manages our internal service funds. So, Wayne, maybe you can explain a little bit about how these work before you
Yeah,
dive
so
in.
the city, the internal services funds are really city savings accounts, if you will, to fund the cost of maintaining and replacing specific existing assets. So basically, this is, you know, we know we're gonna need to replace certain things, whether it's computer equipment, vehicles, or maintain certain things like computer software or buildings. And so this is where we contribute every year towards that replacement, so that we have the funds available, so we don't have these huge budget swings when we need to do something big. And this helps level things out, if you will. So on the management information side, in the interest of time, I won't go over the goals and accomplishments unless you have any specific questions. But basically, this is the fund that we use to replace our information systems, to maintain those information systems and to purchase the equipment that we need when we need to replace it. We will be, as Kathy mentioned earlier, replacing desktops and laptops at City Hall and Public Works, and also doing some training on the new software that will be implemented as part of that. That's one of the big things that we'll be doing this year in Management Information Services.
One other item, we've budgeted about $20,000 to replace the cameras in the community meeting room. So I've been working with Sonoma Valley Community Communications to give us some new quotes and new technology, and that work is already underway, so that we hope to be able to move that forward this summer. But I think, and potentially adding a camera, the layout of the dais is a little awkward, and in terms of how we shoot to different angles, but in working with them to figure out how we can try to, for sure, enhance the quality and maybe some of the angles.
And most of those costs are covered because we've been setting aside money to replace those cameras, so it's worked out pretty well. Turning to page 114, vehicle replacement, the same thing, the funds replacement. This year we're anticipating needing to replace an ambulance at $185,500 and a Public Works Department loader backhoe for $65,000.
And this is the ambulance that you actually approved, I think, a meeting or two ago, so that we could go out and initiate it and start the contract, because it takes about, I can't remember, 9 months to put all the pieces together. So per your direction, we've already started that work. We've kind of pre-approved it, now it hits here in the budget.
On the vehicle replacement fund, has there been any discussion of integrating electric or hybrid vehicles into the fleets? And the cost, like any, whatever the
Yes,
cost
that's part of our,
effects would be?
part of the climate protection goals, climate action plan that we've been working under. So for instance, the building inspector's vehicle, when we replaced it last year, it's a Prius hybrid. And so we're looking at that. Unfortunately, a lot of public vehicles like fire engines, ambulances, and public works vehicles just, they don't make them in electric, or they wouldn't be suitable for that purpose. So we always try to evaluate it and for the need. And if there's an opportunity, we definitely would want to do that. Yeah. Moving on to page 118, the long-term building maintenance fund. All 5 of the projects that I mentioned earlier in the capital improvement program are also listed here under the long-term building maintenance program, because that's where those funds are coming from. And I won't rehash those projects. Be happy to answer any questions.
Just one other thing I'll say on these internal service funds, I think part of our financial sustainability plan over the next few years will be doing some really assessments. The city has really had a good practice of putting money aside for our current assets. So like vehicles, I think we're probably in pretty good shape. MIS, as we add new technology, we'll probably need to add some funding to kind of jumpstart and add to that fund. The world of buildings, again, Wayne's done a good job of kind of putting some of that together, but I think we may even want to have an outside consultant really come in and see if we really have captured everything there, and what should we really be setting aside. Are we setting aside enough? Because a lot of times that is a place the cities underestimate, and we need to maintain our buildings and assets. So we'll do a bit of a kind of a pulse check on that over the next few years, and just make sure that we're putting enough aside. Thank you, Wayne. So page 122 is debt service funds. So in this fund, there are 2 debts. This is basically loans where the city has gone out and borrowed money in order to make some one-time investments. One was called a 2008 Clean Renewable Energy Bonds. This was used to put solar on some city facilities, including the police station and corporation yard. So originally this was paid for by RDA funding, and then was shifted to the city with elimination of RDA. And so basically there are principal payments made of about $41,000 each year, and those will continue through 2024. The other was in 2012. PERS has an opportunity where you can take your unfunded pension debt and you can basically prepay it by taking out a pension obligation bond. So our financial consultants did an analysis on this, and because the rate of return that PERS expects and thinks are going to get is 7.5%, and that's what they're charging you on their unfunded liability as well. And they were able to go to bond, and at an interest rate that was 4%. And so the overall savings over the 9 years of this bonds was estimated about $470,000. And I actually reviewed this in the last month with our financial consultants just to confirm, because sometimes the market changes and what you thought you were going to get is not what you got, and have confirmed that what they estimated is exactly what has been coming in. So this has been a good investment and a smart investment by the city. But those pension obligation bonds we're paying for out of this fund. And then there was a 2000 water bond, but those bonds are paid directly out of the water bond. We'll talk in a minute about the successor agency the city does have, and we'll talk about that in a minute. So these really are just your debt costs, which you are required to pay based on prior agreements. Any questions? All right, so moving to, the next one is the successor agency. So one of the biggest impacts on cities' budgets was in 2011 when the governor announced that he was going to eliminate redevelopment, which we at all that time thought that would not occur. How could that happen? Well, the next 2 years proved it could happen. And so it was basically, it was a very confusing time, and but as of February 1, 2012, redevelopment was dissolved in the state of California. And so there have been a series of state laws that have been passed since then that have adjusted what occurs in the redevelopment. But early on, cities had a choice on whether you wanted to be the successor agency for your redevelopment agency. And if you did, then you have some responsibility in making sure that the assets and the dollars and the obligations are paid. So Sonoma, like most agencies, did choose to be the successor agency of your redevelopment agency, which was called a community development agency. The city did choose to not be the successor agency of the housing agency. So cities had that choice, and so basically in 2012, the Sonoma City Council chose not to be the successor agency. So all the housing assets, cash, and or any facilities that were owned by the redevelopment agency because used to be that 20% of redevelopment funding went to housing. So you had 20% of your funds that were being invested in housing. And so with the housing, when the redevelopment went away, that funding source for housing went away, and cities got to decide if they wanted to keep it. Early on, there was no money to do any of that administration. You kept all the responsibilities and there was no cash flow to do it. There was a subsequent law where you have about $150,000 of administrative allowance every year to manage the assets. This council chose not to be the housing successor agency. All of the assets were transferred to Sonoma County. So, however, you are still the successor agency of the kind of the 80% are the project funds. So what this program budget does, it's really broken into two pieces. The first thing is what we call the successor agency administration. This is really general fund. What this means is you're recognized all the prior commitments from the redevelopment agency. There's been a process where first the state went through and they looked at every contract and every obligation you had, and they basically said, did it meet state law? If it met state law and they agreed, it went on what's called the Recognized Obligation Payment Schedule, or your ROPS. That ROPS used to come every 6 months, now comes once a year and comes to the council as approved. It goes to an oversight board that is made up of the taxing agencies. We have 2 seats on that, an employee and a council member sits on that, and then there's members of the other taxing agencies that sit on that oversight board. And then that recognized obligation payment schedule goes to the Department of Finance and they review it. And they can approve or disapprove individual items or the whole thing. That is a process we go through every year and have since 2012. So this successor agency is split in two pieces. There's the ROPS, which I'll talk about in a minute, and then we received $250,000 to manage those obligations. And so that $250,000 goes in the general fund. So the first budget here is successor agency administration. That's the piece that goes in the general fund. The pieces here basically cover the staff time that is overseeing those recognized obligation schedules. It's also overseeing legal costs and a few other minor items. This year there was the main item here is there is a reduction in legal costs of there's what's in the ROPS, but there's what I actually think will be spent. And so I've not budgeted more than what I think we will spend. The ROPS would actually let us spend more. But if I put any more in this budget, the general fund will have to be subsidizing over the $250,000, and I didn't want to do that. So we could spend more on legal if we have to, based on what we spent the last few years. I think we're fine within what I've placed in this administrative budget. So then the next page, the 134, is the successor agency of what they call the RPPTF, which is a redevelopment property tax trust fund. And that's really for those recognized obligation schedules. And just like earlier we talked about PERS, there's a whole language, it's complicated. We could spend 2 hours on that. We could spend 2 hours just in the world of redevelopment and post-redevelopment. With this, and there are complete separate spreadsheets, and I'm happy to walk through with anyone in detail. And literally it would be another hour-and-a-half work session. Those have come through council. You see them when you're sitting as a successor agency and you approve those schedules once a year. So any council member and member of the public wants to go through them, I'm happy to do them separately. But the department, they've already been through a full vetting. The Department of Finance has approved them. We don't have any say at this point because it's been through that legal process. So basically there are coming in, there'll be $3.8 million of taxes that will come through that the redevelopment used to have. And then we've got about $4 million in expenses, and then there's a transfer. So this is what we are expecting to have this year. And again, so that's kind of the world of redevelopment. So there's some descriptions. There is debt. The city sold debt in 2011, as a lot of agencies did. And there are some other contracts. There's a contract where we help provide some funding to Sonoma Overnight Services and their emergency shelter. And there are a few other things, but again, happy to go through that offline if folks want to know what those items are. There's about 20 different items on that list. Any further questions about?
We should bow our heads on that last one. It's a sad.
But we are starting to see some residual property tax come back to us to fund our services, which isn't bad either.
That's nice.
So the last, in the appendix, I just did want to, there is the letter from the Sonoma Valley Historical Society, which came to us about the request for the railroad district. And so with that, now we're back at a point where if council would like to, we've gone through all of the budget detail. Thank you for your patience. Thank you, team, everyone, for doing a good job of laying everything out for us. Part of what makes cities fun is just both the breadth and the depth of the services we provide. And a lot of times it's underwater, it's not seen, it's not visible. And this is really kind of our one time a year to really show it to all of you and to the community. And there's a lot of great work being done by this organization and a fairly small organization. So really proud of the team and happy to take council questions and comments, and then turn it back to you, and then we'll go back to public comment, and then if there's any direction from the council.
All right, do we have any additional comments, questions from the council?
I guess I just wanted to know, I read this letter from Patricia Cullinan, and it's just a notification? Is that what this is?
It's a request.
Okay. Thank you. Yeah, that was.
Kathy, can you just tell me what the process is now?
So, as I said in the very beginning, we're kind of doing two pieces right here in one. There's your broad overview piece, and we've got budget detail at the same time. Typically, these would be split by about a month and a half, but based on our timing, you're getting them all at once. So, the purpose now would be if there's anything that council has seen or heard that they'd like to have a conversation with. I'd like to add more money here. I'm concerned about this. I don't feel like this was addressed. That's the time for you to all have a conversation. We will come back on. Tonight, Monday the 19th. Monday the 19th is another opportunity, but it would be helpful if there is something that you all agree on that you'd like to change or update. We could change and update that, considering it's not a wholesale do-over, that we could add or augment or something before we bring that back on the 19th. It could reflect any, kind of any of those minor changes in any direction, or et cetera. So this is the time for you all to have a conversation, and again, we'll come back on the 19th for the budget hearing and for your adoption.
Just, I don't know if it's something, or this is the appropriate time, but I'm having a meeting tomorrow with the representative from the Napa Transportation District and Sonoma Transportation folks over the Vine bus route that goes between Napa and Sonoma. And they have a $30,000 to $50,000 shortfall, and I don't know how to address that, but I'm gonna meet with them to find out what they're looking for. And quite a few people from Sonoma showed up at a meeting in Napa, and it didn't, they said it's only $30,000 is what they came up with, but I think further investigation is a little more. But I'd like to think about that and have the council think about that as an option. I want to find out what time they're servicing. I think they're only capturing 3 or 5% of their actual costs, which is, and the numbers are pretty big, the overall cost, but I think we have to be thinking about that in the future, so I don't know if there's any room, but just wanted to bring that up.
So the $30,000 is the
The
what?
shortfall.
Oh, I see,
It's their
okay.
shortfall.
Just to come to Sonoma? Is
No,
that
it's
from-
to go back and forth, and it's just, that's their overall budget, so I'm gonna learn more about it tomorrow in a meeting here.
'Cause, I mean, it would be nice sometime to even check or review how we could expand that service here in Sonoma. And I don't know if that brings them more revenue or it's a burden.
And I'd be
A
glad
burden
to
on
ask them
us.
those questions about their timing and, if they're, 8 AM and 5 PM trips, I don't know what they are, because I haven't ridden the bus in a long time, but I'm gonna learn about it, and maybe we'll get them to
That's
invite us
great.
all to Napa, and we'll ride the bus together.
So there's a couple things. I've had like on our longer term for council to have a presentation come from the Sonoma County Transit Authority agencies. I mean, I'm not saying that name right.
SCTA, Sonoma County Transit Authority. Yeah.
Transit Authority. I think it'd be good to have the executive director come out and talk to the council about what does public transit look like in the valley. I know that's been an area of concern, and so it might be good to have him come out and speak. We could also look at this. Based on the overall dollars, my recommendation would be is to take some time to investigate and really make sure we want to do this. But based on the adjustments in the TOT that Sue was looking at over the weekend, if there would be some additional, not pulling into reserves, but just some additional funding that you could potentially do that if as we investigate, it's something we want to look at.
And I'm just thinking about it from the point of view of workers that are going back and forth to talk about, where people have housing, and I just want to investigate as much as I can and get some other ears in the conversation as well.
And they have numbers of how many riders they have,
Yeah,
I'm
oh,
sure.
yeah. I'll come back to council with whatever they give me. I'll share that with the city manager. She can do whatever she does with it.
I guess my thoughts were about the planning department, and I wonder if we have enough staffing in that department. Sort of anecdotally, everyone I know that works in, architects and builders and plumbers, everyone is saying that they're like busy, like they haven't been in 10 years, and that's like regular residential in addition to, we have these large development projects in front of us, and I'm sure there will be more that will be proposed because of how wonderful Sonoma is. So I, just as a indicator, the historic train district, we have things that we want to do as a city, and if we are swamped doing projects, which is also our work, then can we ever get to some of the things we want to do for our town that take extra work? And so I guess that's a question I have is, given the climate right now of all this construction and development, do we need more people in the planning department?
Yeah, so this is an interesting, it's a fair question. and I know I've talked about this both with Wayne, with his staffing levels, and with David, and coming from my last agency where we were in a similar place. And yet I will tell you, finding planners or contracting out for additional building folks, there's some push me pull yous there. One, it's really hard to find additional planning folks right now. And two, we're gonna hit a bubble where you hire someone and then literally maybe you don't have work for them in 2 months, 2 years if we hit some kind of a, so then you try to find a consultant for those
Right.
peaks.
Yeah.
And you're paying a higher price, which can work, but then staff still needs to review the work. So, and I know, they're on, Wayne does we have an outside contract inspector to do plan checks, and yet there's also, feeling like we still need to review their work. So sometimes, unless you can really hire a full-time position, I think the department has done a really good job with, there's been a number of special projects that have come through. As we look at the general plan, we won't be doing that in-house.
Right.
So we are gonna need to bring in some additional resources, with that. So those are some general kind of manager thoughts I have.
It's definitely, it's not a criticism at all. It's
Yeah,
just
no, it's
the
it's
environment. It's like everything
Yeah.
is being built.
I love that question. And it's a great question because I personally feel that in my department, and I think this is true of the building department as well, that we are pretty much maxed out.
Right.
But at the same time, it's bringing on a new person is just, it's a big step. And
Yes.
so when talking about this with the city manager, I think we're more inclined to try to find opportunities to contract out for certain kinds of projects before we take that step. But, we certainly are in the place where we are having that conversation because we need to have that conversation.
I support additional funding to the
Mhm.
extent necessary to build in a little bit of breathing room for both of you, if other people support that, just because it's.
I support that, but I like to watch them sweat.
So as long as we're on the subject, I think the city hall is a beautiful building, but it certainly doesn't seem a good place for people. That,
What do you mean by that?
well, are people stuffed into the offices? All of those things. It just doesn't seem to be that for me. And I'm not in there, so I have no idea, but, it may not be an appropriate space ergonomically or any of those other things. I'm not saying, let's go somewhere
Well, it's
else.
a great space, but it's kind of maxed out too.
Yeah.
That's how I would put it.
Yeah, and we are, and we've been talking internally, we could see some kind of cube configuration and some realignment of some space. So, we do have the kind of the conference room and the visitors bureau that really isn't being used. We've got some water leaks in there, we need to kind of figure out if that's leaking or not leaking. I do think our facilities, this is one place where we really are thin. You've got Wayne that kind of helps shepherd projects through. We've got Trent as our maintenance superintendent who's overseeing, water, streets, parks. We don't have someone focusing just on facilities. And so it really tends to be kind of this catch as catch can, and sometimes for all the right reasons, facility projects slip, which is, I think, part of the reason next year I really want to create a separate facilities budget. We really kind of need to have some eyes on that in a different way, because we have some beautiful assets, but we also have some assets that could use some investment.
And, the building, it's gorgeous.
It's gorgeous.
It was built many, many
It's
years
gorgeous.
ago before, technology and wiring and good lighting and air and all of those things. So, I just think, that has to be somewhere in thought when it comes to the comfort and a good place to work.
I see we have one more opportunity for discussion, but next we're gonna go out to public for public comments. And you can either stay where you are or come and stand. And since the last person went to 4 minutes, it's gonna be 4 minutes.
So great presentation, thank you. The first thing I want to say is I think the council should consider a monthly treasurer's report where it's reported back to council and the public exactly how the city's performing to budget. Next question I had was when I was looking at this, I wanted to see how how the city had done before, but there was no 2015-16 audited financial statement. I'm sure that has to do with absences and folks, so, that would have just been helpful to kind of assess whether this made a lot of sense or not. I'm sure the public's gonna be thrilled that, some of these transfers out of the water fund are stopped. And I think it's important that, we all look at exactly what has come out of that fund over time. And I think that there are some more tentacles and teeth to this issue than anybody's really looked at yet. And I think you all should seek some good advice on this. I mean, the city has presented these financial statements. They used it to acquire debt, get bonds. And I don't know that those were presented properly. So we may want to take some time to get a full accounting of that. One thing I'd suggest for the electeds is take a minute and read or Google SEC and municipal bonds. Just take a minute and look at how the SEC gets involved when a municipality goes out with bonds and misrepresent themselves with financial statements. So, very serious stuff. And I think that there's a lot more work to do there. So I appreciate the steps that are taken, and I think that there's a lot more to go. Finally, one thing I noticed in the budget, and I think this is really important as far as water goes, I see that it appears that the city has used water funds for the recycled water project. And water funds should not be used for anything except for providing services for water. I'm not going to get any benefit from that recycled water project. I'm sure maybe someday you'll bring it to my house. That'd be fine. I can use it to water my lawn. But until then, I don't think we should be paying for it. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? No? All right, so I guess it comes back to us. What would direction be?
So I think at this point it would be helpful just to hear generally maybe from each council member. If there's anything else you want to talk about that you want to raise and talk about with each other, this would be the time for you to raise that. Or if there's nothing else, you kind of talk, been able to answer it, put out questions, and maybe generally it'd be good to hear from each of you about what you see and overall in the budget and what your thoughts are.
So here.
Well, go ahead and start, make it short and quick. I just want to thank city staff for it, for doing the budget. My biggest complaint over the years was that every year it's always comparing apples to oranges. That's no fault of our city manager, because you're taking on from a past city manager. So I understand that. With that said, I would like to see the city move to a 2-year budget, because that way it's not apples and oranges, and I think it would be a lot easier for public and council members to know. I've been on the council for 5 years, so I kind of starting to understand the budget, but then it changes. But I did like some of the changes, but I just want to thank staff for for the job well done. I understand that we have very little staff. As a council member, I'm asking for cemetery, I'm asking for all this stuff. I'm keeping my mouth shut for a little bit because I want to let staff get into the roles. We have a new financial director and new public works director. But with that said, I'm hoping that next year we will be able to start looking at the cemetery and a couple other things that we can kind of wrap our heads around, even probably with some of our agreements that we've had in the past that could come back and haunt us at some point. That's kind of why I asked for what some of the timelines and contracts we've entered into. And it's good to be reminded this time. It's a good time to be reminded so we can look at those to see if it's something that we want to continue. And I want to thank you and your service for doing the 4th of July and all that. I know it's separate, but thank you.
I'll make sure to pass that on.
Well, I agree with David. Thank you so much, the staff, and I'm happy to meet our new Public Works Director. And I'm sad to see Dan go because he's been so good for me, because he explained probably some of the silliest questions I had. So I appreciate that. I just want, I guess I want people to understand the police department is serious business to me. And I think there is no visibility. I think they're so lucky to have Brett as the chief. But every time, generally with the city, we don't have the staff. That's I don't understand, because we're not building cars, we're not doing any of those things. What we are doing is providing service. So the issue of staffing is an issue for me, and as well, not necessarily in the police department, but that seems to be a mantra, we don't have staff, and I'm probably exaggerating that part. But you know, the issue of people who come here to visit us, what's really important to me, and you know, it seems like a silly little issue with the cabs, who are these people? They live here, but who are they? I have no idea who they are. And I'm not just talking about Uber, I think they're killing themselves. So, but I just respect to, are these cars actually safe? And I think that's sort of a revenue for the police department to have someone inspect the cars and also do background checks. I think it's important for people who are providing services to our citizens are really safe for our citizens. I guess the other thing, affordable housing is really something that's very important to me. And I know we're doing everything we can with respect to that. That's a subject that's already been discussed. And I heard from the Sonoma Valley Fund, they touched on an issue of workforce housing that is actually with the Housing Authority in Aspen. So that's something I'm taking a look at to see what they mean by that. Because we keep saying we don't even know what it really means. So I'm excited to know that somebody actually put it in a document, workforce housing. So I think we might have an opportunity to take a look at that ourselves. And I don't know, I think this was a great presentation. And I really appreciate all the hard work. And of course, to our city clerk, thank you so much for the laptops. That was the first thing I think you remember me saying to you. That our website, I'm happy about the cameras. In the community room, I'll tell you, the person, as you look at the dais, far right hand corner, I'm sorry, Vice Mayor, but that's the short straw seat, because all you ever see is a head and maybe hands flailing out once in a while. And I can't believe that's what we've got in this city, of this huge city with all these sophisticated people. And that's what we offer our public, so thank you.
All right, down the line. So again, you know, as everyone said, represents a tremendous amount of work, and I appreciate all the late nights and weekends, and you know, that everybody's been working, and it's a real sacrifice with your families, and I really do appreciate it. For next year, in terms of the budget, since we're here, what would be I think it'll be much better, like David said, that we can compare the same data every year in the same format, so we don't wonder, you know, now it's categorized as something different, so we can't look at it. That'll be helpful. I think it would also be helpful to have just a one document that has all of the financial data on it, instead of it broken up amongst with the narrative. Like just, maybe it's not for everybody, but I do a lot of accountings with my clients. So if I just raw financial data, that gives me a better picture. What did we start with? What do we take in? What do we spend? You know, like a regular financial statement would be helpful for me to understand it. On the actual allocations, planning and permitting, we talked about that. I also was just wondering, so in terms of like a youth commission or youth activities, where does that fit in?
It's not yet, because I think we have to kind of finish the exercise. We had a stakeholder meeting, and we'll do one more, last Friday, we'll do one more meeting, talk about kind of what it could look like, and what are some different pieces. So we're not at that point. Again, that's something that I think when we bring the report, if there's some augmentation of funding, and again, I think it's gonna be more it may be more community-based in some ways, with some other folks maybe even helping. So that we'll deal with that when we bring the report back, and if there's some funding needs, we'll make those recommendations.
So we can basically figure it out.
We can figure it out, and then there can be an adjustment there. Because again, what we've got is we've got a little bit of extra revenue capacity.
And then I know we've done a lot of tremendous things this year, so this is gonna seem extremely pushy, so you don't have to agree with it, but I would love to do the historic train district, and I'm not sure, because I don't know all the work that goes into it, if it's an application, or what the work is, but I'm not at this moment, but I'd be interested to know, what does it take to get that certification, whatever it is? How much staff time is it? Is it paying a consultant to do the report, to turn it in, or I just would like to know practically what are the steps?
So, a couple of things. Thank you, everyone, for staying through the basketball game. Just a quick for Madeline with the CAD companies. I think Joe Costello, former mayor, is their attorney. And I know they have insurance companies and all the other people behind them. I know there's some people that look like characters that drive them, but it's, you know, and the Uber, you know, there were a lot of them in here for Bottle of Rock. I think somebody told me that they'd gone online and there were like 130 drivers here in town, which was kind of interesting. I would love to have a business license from all of them, but that's probably not going to happen. And Kathy, thank you and for jumping in so quickly with, you know, you're still new and getting us up to date and changing some of the things that we're doing here. As far as the historic train district, I think we need to have a master plan for Depot Park and everything around it. It should be included in the whole package. You know, with Mason Abbey, Depot Park, the entrance to I think there's a proposal talking about building coming to the Sonoma Cheese Factory, a redo of that. And we should be thinking about that entire process. So whenever staff is working on the projects that are coming forward, we should think about that. I'm sure it'll come eventually, but I think there's a lot of private money, especially with what on the General Vallejo. You know, I think they raised more money than they needed for it, and with the Ting coming to Depot Park, I think there's a willingness to raise money for that. When Kelso was up here asking for 15 grand, I think you could raise that pretty quickly, whether you get a grant or whatever. But I do agree with Kathy that I think staff has a lot going on, so I don't think that idea is going to go away. So I'm in favor of looking at that down the road. But I'm happy to accept this budget. Let's move on.
And I think I already gave most of my comments. One is more future looking. It seems like, you know, there's some planning money for housing related things, but with the impact fee study, I don't know what the philosophy or the thought of where the money's going to go, but I do think that we need to establish a segregated housing trust to start squirreling away monies for the occasional exciting project down the road. And on the staff question, I mean, I do see the prudent point and the fact that the economy is probably going to start declining in the next couple of years, so it would make sense to hire somebody. But on the other hand, it does seem like a common answer that I get is like, oh, we don't have staff for that, we don't have staff for that. So whatever the solution is, I certainly support, you know, the staff human side of things. And I also still would like to do the historic train district, and I would support it doing it now, because I think that having that sort of certification on that area would be, as it's all getting planned together, it suddenly becomes like start squirreling away monies for the occasional exciting project down the road. And on the staff question, I mean, I do see the prudent point and the fact that the economy is probably going to start declining in the next couple of years, so it would make sense to hire somebody. But on the other hand, it does seem like a common answer that I get is like, oh, we don't have staff for that, we don't have staff for that. So whatever the solution is, I certainly support, you know, the staff human side of things. And I also still would like to do the historic train district, and I would support it doing it now, because I think that having that sort of certification on that area would be, as it's all getting planned together, it sort of becomes like a leading identity of that area. So I would, if I had my way, I would fund it out of this budget. And thank you so much, all of you, for your work and the fact that you're still here.
Very good. Thank you, council, appreciate it. So we'll come back on the 19th, bring you a final budget and a new forward in 70 vision. Thank you, everyone, appreciate it.
Adjourned.